Good afternoon, everyone. This is our Tuesday, June 27th, regular Board of County Commissioners work session. And we have a little switch in our agenda. The U.S. Forest Service could not make it up today, but we're going to have an update on the Independence Pass gate and turnaround.
That's correct. I'm Brian Pettit. I'm the Public Works Director for the county. And we have had some changes with the project that was funded by the Board of County Commissioners, which was going to be a truck turnaround on Independence Pass. This was being done in concert with CDOT and a detection system that was going to detect vehicles over 35 feet in length, and then the county's truck turnaround would turn those trucks around and send them back down Highway 82 rather than illegally and unsafely travel over Independence Pass. So today, I'd like to go through a quick presentation, bring the board up to speed on how we got to where we are today, talk about the changes that have happened just in the last month, and then talk about a path forward on how we can proceed given the changes that have occurred. So while this map isn't the best, it is a good representation of what we did. So when we first looked at Independence Pass and providing a truck turnaround, we looked at three different areas. Area 1 here, Area 2 here, and this is the gate closure area right here, and we were looking at Area 3 as a potential turnaround for trucks. Area 2 was selected primarily because of its geometry and turning trucks around on the right-hand side of Highway 82, and because of sight distances were adequate to safely turn trucks around. And so we designed a truck turnaround area at this area 2 with the board's consent, and we put a project out to bid. During that time, we had a chicane, if you remember, employed as part of this project. And after we got down the road a little ways on the chicane, we had some pushback from the community and the Independence Pass Foundation that maybe a chicane could be constructed later if it's actually needed, if we still have a problem. So we ended up with a design similar to this where trucks could turn around on this is the traveled portion of the road going up toward to Independence Pass. Trucks could swing in here and safely make this turning movement and head back down Highway 82. This was the chicane design that we eliminated where, if I can find a clicker, vehicles would head in and continue on up Highway 2 and trucks would turn around here, and we would develop a chicane where a vehicle over 35 foot in length would be physically prohibited from going on up the highway. So we eliminated a lot of the chicane design and just provided a truck turnaround. Over the last couple months, Independence Pass has been working on the gate beautification project. And in doing that, they created a wider turnaround area at the gate. And we're looking at it here. It's about 105 feet wide and 110 feet long. We're confirming that as we speak, but it is possible, and we've talked to CDOT to allow a truck to make this turning movement. These trucks, the CDOT standards, a WB62, a 62-foot long truck, to make this turning movement without backing. And that's a CDOT standard that we need to comply with. The issues with this area, so that's the change that happened. The two changes are we eliminated the chicane, which would have to be constructed at Site 2. We can't do that here. And Independence Pass kind of cleaned up this area a little bit and provided a wider spot. So initially it looks like we can safely make this turning movement with a large truck here. The issues are sight distance up the road, and we think if we can either lower the speed or get CDOT to agree that the sight distance is permittable, I think we can get CDOT's authorization to allow this truck turning area to exist. Frankly, CDOT likes this area better if it works, because legally this is where the closure area is for Independence Pass. The Area 2 that we were formerly looking at is about a mile down the road, and it's also prior to the last private property owner, Taggart Lake area. So we would have some conflict with commercial deliveries to that private property owner. So there are pros and cons to both Area 2 and this one. A path forward is to try to use this in an interim condition this year during the Grand Avenue Bridge Closure Project. See how it works, see how it functions. If we need to build a chicane, we would come back to the board and look at Area 2 again, but we could try this area out and see if it works as an interim solution. I do not have a final call from CDOT yet. This is their highway, and they would need to give us final authorization. But for today from the board, I need some direction because we have a $226,000 contract that's pending for a contractor to do Area 2, to build the truck turnaround there. I need to inform that contractor one way or the other whether we're going to do it this year or not.
So, Brian, I'm sure you've talked to Karen Teague. The winter gate closure, that parking lot gets used in the wintertime for skiers and walkers and snowmobilers. In the summertime, it may get used by people who want to bike, use that as a starting point for bicycling up the pass. So how would that impact if we had to have a truck turnaround?
Yes, so the intent here, and you can see by this picture where this guy is walking here, this is the end of the parking area that Independence Pass Foundation had constructed. There's quite a great distance between this point and there's a U.S. Forest Service kiosk. And so that would be signed for the parking area. The trucks would actually use this larger area back here, and we would sign this appropriately for no parking. We would have to put additional signage on the highway to delineate, and this is another issue, to delineate where the trucks would need to start their turn. Mm-hmm. So a little bit of the issue with this spot is trucks are on Mainline Highway 82. You would need to signify with signage and maybe lane marking that trucks need to start their turn here in order to functionally make this movement. But this area here, George, we would sign as no parking, and this area would be that winter parking and bicycle parking area in the summertime.
Okay, and then the other question I have is, it seems like if this works with CDOT, there may be an opportunity to utilize some of those dollars to do some enforcement on the Twin Lakes side, which really doesn't have anything happening right now with CDOT.
Yeah, and it is a CDOT call whether to what extent we would need to do improvements here. That could tap into that $226,000. Certainly the sign purchases will, because we're going to have to do that, but we would have flexibility to use that money in other places, including potentially putting a detection system, just like CDOT's doing on this side, on the Lake County side. Ironically, the detection systems are running about the same cost as the truck turnaround cost.
Wow. Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. It's good to see how this has been progressing. And obviously, you're going to need a truck turning sign up valley from that. For traffic coming downhill, and perhaps one with the orange flags as well, in case, because that is a little bit on the straightaway where people start picking up some speed. They're towards the end of the road, and so both you're changing the speed limit to a more moderate speed, and then a truck turning sign, caution, would be really important. I kind of wonder a little about the turnaround area in terms of making sure their parked cars don't exceed into the turnaround zone, and that's clearly marked that no parking here, truck turnaround, or whatever, because otherwise you could see people kind of stacking up and thinking, well, somebody can get by me, they can still pull out, so they've created a second row of parking, so to speak, like you do at a barn, field party, and people just kind of do it randomly. So I see those two things. And then I think it'd be very exciting to look at the measurement system over on the Twin Lakes side. And, right around their gate, they have this is your last chance to turn around signs already. And if they could be measured before that and something like that installed over there, I think it'd be really valuable. So those are my initial comments, and I do think we still have to keep this target date of the Glenwood Springs Bridge closure, right front and center of whatever we're able to get done.
Steve?
Brian, is there going to be some electronics run up the highway to be associated with this at this time? Something in terms of a measuring device or sign, electronic signage or anything like that? We need to run power up to there.
Not at this time. The electrical need is down at the detection system that CDOT has, and that's where, frankly, the detection system needs power and also the variable message sign. But that's the extent of it. There's nothing needed here.
And that will be farther down the road?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Greg?
Just coming from the south end, from up the pass, that is a drag strip. If people accelerate, it's a straight line, so you get a lot of speed for people coming through. So that was my first concern, was speed control. But I think it's a great solution. It saves a lot of money for the county. The Pass Foundation is up for this. I think we should jump at the chance to explore it. For now, it's a quick way of solving a problem before the bridge closure. And I think it's a great idea, and I think if it's marked properly, there's plenty of room for parking. And the end, the north end of the parking area is where the natural turn boundary is. There ought to be some creative sign there. If that money can be used on the other side of the pass, I happened to be driving to Dillon last week for a conference, and I took pictures of the signs that are in place that CDOT has, and I actually posted them on my Facebook page and said, what do you guys think? Is this enough? And some people said, no, the signs need to be bigger, or they need to be more. And the only solution that really came up that we appreciate is how every one of us for 30 years still stops and slows down and balks when we see the fake cop in Twin Lakes. And, we could put a fake cop over there to get people's attention. Why not? If we're really trying to solve a problem, there are other solutions we could look at. We talked about creating some sort of gate, sort of barrier that a longer, bigger truck, taller truck, maybe can't get through. So it's interesting, but something does need to be done there. If we can invest this money in the detection system, I think that's a great step in the right direction.
Great. Thank you.
So, Patty?
Yeah, the problem for doing that is what happens if what we do doesn't work and we need that money to be back over on this side.
Yeah.
So we have to keep that in mind too. This is a test. This is an experiment, and we have to see how it works. So I think there's some parts of that money maybe we're able to use for some enforcement or just to beef it up on the Lake County side. But at the ACRA meeting today, the bridge closure came up, and the concern for the bike use in the summer and those months when there's going to be more traffic going over Independence Pass. And a lot of people want a big signage, more signs, to say, the bike, share the road or whatever the signs are, about the bike law, that, you have to give them 3 feet to pass, and, just so that people drive, around those blind curves, but the narrows. But they just felt that we should educate the influx of people who've never driven in the past before, that there was a lot of bike use. So I don't know what we might be able to do for that. And I said one of the problems with that, too, is the bike riders who don't follow the law. It works both ways, so we have to, maybe do something with, increased traffic this next 3 months. Please, take caution with bikes or something. I don't know, Brian, but I told him I would bring that up. And I think that was kind of the key point of the ACRA discussion. But I think moving the turnaround to where we can try it at the gate, with cooperation with Independence Pass Foundation makes good sense. If it doesn't work, we haven't really put any investment in there, and we can do it differently next year.
Correct.
So, but I think it's good that we'll have something in effect, because we know that we're going to have more trucks coming this way, or coming that way, and going back. So we need to get a jump on it.
So it sounds like we want you to confer with CDOT, see if they would go along with this plan, and if so, you can tell your contractor we're holding off on that, and then work with CDOT on some options for the Twin Lakes side, electronic signage or whatever. Do we know what sort of message they're going to be using, or on those electronic signs, even coming up the Roaring Fork Valley?
Yes. Well, on the detection system, my understanding is it'll detect a truck it'll signify that you are over 35 feet and to turn around in now a mile and a half, or whatever that mileage is. So that will be at this one. The down valley signs, we can work with CDOT in changing that verbiage. I know recently it wasn't quite as accurate as we would have liked to have been, but I think the over 35-foot limit needs to be clear, and that they are not to travel over Independence Pass.
Yeah, I would make that clear, and subject to a $1,500 fine in big letters.
Okay.
Rachel?
One other thing I'd been thinking about a little bit, just going into the larger bridge closed model, is talking with the city of Aspen, because they have a number of electronic mobile signs that they use for big special events like X Games and Jazz Fest, and see if any of those are available at times when they're not being used for the large special events. Maybe have one at Cozy Point Ranch, something to augment the CDOT signs, because, I'm not sure the right location, but I just know traffic stops at the Brush Creek light, and you can see it one more time. Vehicles over 35 feet prohibited, but it'd be nice to be working in concert and using all the resources in the Upper Valley, and just see if the city has some extra mobile signs we can use for that time period, or some of that time period.
Great. And many times we have 2 variable message signs. We use those during X Games. Maybe the ones you've seen have actually been the county signs. So we have availability to VMS as well.
Yeah.
So we
Great.
can help with that.
All right, thanks, Brian. Anything
So just
else?
moving forward, just so I'm clear, it is possible that CDOT says, we've looked
Right.
at this, it doesn't work. We will revert then to Area 2 and check back with the board on that contract being signed.
All right, just let us know.
All right, good, thanks.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Let's see, we're going to go into our first quarter budget update and review of the second quarter budget supplemental requests.
For the getting ready for the third quarter.
Just gonna unplug.
Good afternoon. I'm Connie Baker, Picken County Budget Director, and I'm here today to present a first quarter budget update. And then after that, we will look at 10 different supplemental requests. The adjusted 2017 Picken County budget includes expenditures of about $146 million and revenues just shy of $100 million. That leaves a use of fund balance of $46 million. That's our adjusted budget that includes all of the carry forward projects from 2016. This update only looks at the first 3 months of the year, and on pages 4 through 5 of your packet, it shows details on revenues for the first quarter. There are different columns here. First, the original 2017 budget, then the 2017 budget with adjustments and carry forwards. Next are January to March actuals. Then what percent of the budget is that? It's either been received or on the expenditures used, and then how much budget is remaining. So on the revenue side, for the general fund, I've listed out the different general revenues and then department by department. And then on the next page, we have the special revenue funds and the enterprise funds. Property tax is our most stable revenue. We typically receive about 45% of our property tax for the year within the first quarter and 95% of that within the second quarter of the year. And we do receive almost the full amount of property tax. So as you see for the general fund property tax, we're well on course to meet budget. Our sales tax can be more variable, but this year we are right on track with budget. Through the month of April, we're 0.1% ahead of budget, so just a nudge above budget, and are expecting a strong summer, so sales tax is looking good right now. Other revenues vary according to the time of year that we receive them. And so you can see in the details down through each different county department. For the whole general fund, we are at 33% of the budget through March. And for all of county funds, we are at 34% of budget. So revenues are looking on track at the moment. There are no particular concerns in this area at this time. On the expenditure side, there are two different worksheets. The first shows personnel expenditures for the first quarter. Now, payroll-wise, of course, payroll is every 2 weeks. Through the month of March, that's about just slightly over 21% of the payrolls for the year. But there were a few benefit payouts within the first quarter that are whole year payments, like fitness, wellness, or merit bonuses. And as well, health insurance has 25% of the budget in the first quarter. So I would expect to see payroll somewhere between around 22% or so of budget, which is right about where we're at. You see a little variation from one department to another, but general fund total, we're at 22% of budget. All funds put together, we're at 21% of budget. So payroll, we are on track also.
Connie, can I ask you a question just to clarify? Sure. So what you're saying is payroll takes up approximately 22% of our general fund budget?
No.
Overall budget?
No. For the first 3 months of the year, if we look at our whole payroll budget for the year, for the full county, that would be about $31 million for the full year payroll and benefits. Through the month of March, that would be about 21 to 22% of the $31 million budget that should be expended at that point of the year.
What does that 31 million equate in terms of overall percentage, approximately?
Of our whole budget, it varies from department to department, but overall, it's about 2/3. Some departments it's higher. For example, an office like the assessor's office has a very high percentage of personnel. What they're performing are services that their staff is performing, and they have very few physical costs of materials or services that they need to purchase. Some other departments like Road and Bridge, where they're buying sanding materials or other supplies, the personnel costs might be relatively a little bit lower than that. But for the county as a whole, about 2/3 of the whole budget.
And then out of that, in terms of health insurance, is about 25% of that total? Because that shouldn't change.
Let's see.
I'm just trying to get an idea in terms of,
No, health insurance is less than that. Health insurance for the county as a whole would be approximately $4 million of this $31 million. So when I was saying 25%, the first 3 months of the calendar year, you would expect to see 25% of the health insurance budget spent. So as we're looking at these two tables with personnel expenditures, and we're looking at the full budget for the year and trying to compare how we're doing against our budget, how much would we expect to see spent during those first 3 months of the year? And so that's what I'm comparing to see if we're on track to meet.
No, yeah, I understand. I was just trying to get a sort of a bigger picture while you're presenting it. Great, thank you.
Next, we have operations. Again, detailed out department by department for the general fund, and then on the next page, all the special revenue and enterprise funds. And Here you see a lot of variation department by department. There are some departments that have a lot of upfront expenditures during the year with yearly dues or memberships being paid at once. Other departments are more seasonal in nature and have their busy season later on during the year, so they don't spend very much in the first 3 months. With that being said, for the general fund, we're at 25% of budget spent on operations for the first quarter, so right on track. And for all funds put together, total expenditures are 20%. Now, I did not include in your packet details on replacement schedule items, capital projects, one-time expenditures, just because there is not enough activity within the first 3 months of the year to really get a good picture of how we're doing compared to budget. But we will bring those back to you later on in the year as we have more information to make it meaningful to present it. Are there questions before I move on to the last chart? I know I've gone through this kind of quickly. I don't want to dwell on details, but I'm certainly willing to answer questions.
Just, and I might have missed it, but on the risk cost center, they're already at 78% of budget for the year. Are we anticipating that they've already spent most of what they need to, or they're going to need a close to?
Yeah, their operations budget mainly has to do with premiums that are being paid, and those are paid up front during the year. So that makes sense to me. Right, right.
This is a very simple question. If you go back to page 6, I can't help but ask. Under elections, at least on the document that I have, there's an expenditure of $1.
That's right. That's right.
The biggie.
Of course, in the first quarter of the year, they just had not spent anything on operations yet.
We do track every dollar.
It's chocolate, but
It was actually, that's rounded up. It was slightly less than $1.
it was like 98 cents worth of chocolate. Okay. I'm sorry, I just had to ask.
No detail too small.
Yeah, or for me to point out on all these numbers. I go right to that dollar figure.
Greg?
Just one bottom, page 4, land management, open space, general fund, 138%. Just looking at the open space general fund on the bottom of page 4, you've
Yes.
got 138%, so our revenues are.
Yes, so thank you for bringing that up. This was an unanticipated revenue that was received. The $350,000 was a payment that we received through the Wexner Two Shoes land exchange. It was not included in our budget, so that is actually extra revenue that the general fund has received. You do see an adjusted budget amount of $254,000. That's not for this land exchange. That has to do with the grant that we will be receiving to repair the, what is it, the lime kilns that are up at Redstone? I may be getting
Coke ovens.
Coke
right,
ovens?
yeah.
So the $350,000 is extra above and beyond.
Okay, good, Ben. Counting good.
Okay, so now moving down to the last chart of this update. The last chart looks only at the general fund, and it gives a picture of where we are with our fund balances for the year. We divide the general fund up into different pots of money in order to track how much we have in reserves. The smallest area at the bottom of the chart, the light green, is our Tabor Reserve. Then we have our operating reserve and contingency in the dark green. The yellow section is restricted fund balances that include anything from the animal shelter to tipsy taxi, park dedication fees, and so on. And then the blue is our surplus operating reserve. The red is our capital fund. So you see in the first bar, that is our beginning fund balance at the beginning of 2017 after carry forwards have been taken out. Then we show the effect of the 2017 approved budget. The 2017 budget does have use of fund balance, $2 million in the capital fund. 1.3 million of that is an addition to the sheriff and admin building, and then funding some other projects that came up. The operating side, the 232,000 use of fund balance, was to fund the public health department as a startup. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had a use of fund balance in the operating side. So the middle bar shows the effect of the budget if the full budget is spent in 2017. Then we take into account the supplementals this year. In the first quarter, supplementals were approved in the general fund of about $462,000. There were only two supplementals that affected the general fund. $300,000 was for the EHOP, Employee Housing Loan Program, and then the rest was transferring public health out of the general fund and setting up its own fund balance in a separate fund. So that's the effect of the first quarter supplementals. Then this also shows if all of the second quarter supplementals are approved, the ones that affect the general fund, this shows the effect of that. So a visual of what our fund balances would look like if all of the requests are approved. And this just gives you an idea, as we're looking at supplemental requests, how much fund balance would we have left over at the end? What's the effect on the budget? Any questions?
Looks like we're on track for what we thought we'd be doing, spending down saved monies for the building and other initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Rachel, that was the point that for the public I just wanted to make. As we spend down the fund balances, it's really largely because for most capital expenditures, we have a pay-as-you-go philosophy where we save up into fund balances and then we spend down on projects. The one exception to this has been we did finance a good portion of, but not all of, our building addition and remodel. That also did involve some use of fund balance. And so as these fund balances are decreasing, it's really because we're building broadband and public safety radio infrastructure. We're building the facilities that we're building. We're really making a lot of capital investments. I'd also note one more thing for the public. The fund balances that are highlighted in the green, the operating reserves, GFOA has a recommended fund balance amount, and the GFOA is the Government Finance Officers Association that is considered healthy for public entities. That is where we set the green lines. Everything above that is in addition to that healthy level, according to the Government Finance Officers Association.
Very good. If there are no other questions, we'll move on to our supplemental requests. As I said, there are 10 different requests, and I think we'll probably just go in alphabetical order if the departmental representatives are here. I'll let each person presenting the request come up, and then I will be available if there are any other budget-related questions for these supplemental requests. Do we have airport room?
Flip a coin, guys.
Jonah Frank with Fleet Management here with the airport with
Chris Padilla, the airport controller.
We're here to go over the budget supplemental for the airport fuel tank upgrade. We put the budget, or we went through the budget process last year. We had it proposed to get the project completed this year. We put the RFP out and we got some good responses back from vendors. The prices were more than we had expected with some site limitations that we had from the aspect of the tank location to other objects such as the generator and the fence in the area. There has to be certain setbacks, so we had to do a better tank to meet those requirements, along with other site limitations of working inside the fence at the airport. So we're needing our budget to complete this project this year to meet the airport's fuel demands for their winter operations during snow removal.
So, Jonah, you're saying that the tanks that we currently have at the airport are undersized, and at least that's how I read in the memo. So, and you just mentioned that we have some constraints in terms of where we can expand those tanks. So it's a question of expanding tanks versus just adding an additional tank?
It's easier to replace the current tank and then conform with the requirements for the tank location. We were putting in the spec for a UL 142, which is a certain type of double shield firewall tank, and then you have to have a 50-foot setback from that tank, and we have then changed that to a UL 2085, which does not have that limitation, so you can put it next to other structures in the generator that is next to this tank. As far as upgrading the tank or just putting an additional tank, it becomes more cumbersome and makes the site and everything else larger, so it is easier just to replace the tank that is there. There is some structural issues with the tank that's currently there. The exterior wall is leaking water into the second membrane, so that's one of the reasons we need to replace this tank. It is too small for our needs, is the main reason.
All right, thank you. Steve, then Patty.
Joan, I was curious do you have any idea why the exterior wall of it was compromised?
It's a concrete design and the concrete cracked, and so we've treated it and tried to prevent any leakage, but the water seeps in from the outside as concrete is porous, and if it has any sort of crack or membrane issue, it's just a rubber paint coating over the concrete on the outside of the tank. The new tank we're going to be putting in is going to be a steel with concrete in the middle, in between the two layers of steel.
Okay, Patty was up unless you want to follow up on that question.
Where is this tank located?
It's over on Owl Creek at the
so it's on the
AOC
other side.
Operations Center next to their airfield generator.
Did we have an issue in the past with the jet fuel tanks not being large enough? Do you remember? Do you guys remember that we were afraid we were going to run out of jet fuel?
That hasn't come up since I've been here, Patty, but it may
Maybe
have
I'm
come
thinking
up in
way
your
back.
earlier. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I just remember there being an issue with the possibility of running out of jet fuel, especially during the holiday seasons when we had such high demand. So that might have been way earlier in my term.
We can try and look
That's
back
okay.
into it.
That's okay.
I'm not aware of that.
But these are on the other side because the jet fuel tanks are on the GA side, right? They're
Yeah,
on the GA.
the jet fuel's for the Atlantic operations. And
Right,
this
so
is
it's in
for-
that compound there? Great. And then during this changeover, you'll still have the capacity of a truck that can fuel, so you guys aren't running out of gas out there during the construction process?
We are going to fuel at Public Works, and then if we need to put tanks over there for an intern, we can do that as well.
Okay. Hate to have them run out of gas out there.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. This may be a roundabout question, but won't some of the costs be recovered through the actual fuel sales in the future? I mean, this is kind of like maintaining what you need to maintain to do business as an airport.
The cost recuperation on this will be through landing fees. This is not going to be fuel that we'll be selling. So
Okay,
it'll
so
be
it's
from
the
operations.
passenger facility charges, essentially.
Not,
that help.
not specifically the passenger facility charges. Those have to be approved with the airlines. This is going to be for landing fees because it'll be for snow removal equipment and operational vehicles.
Okay,
So it's just to fuel our own trucks.
Correct.
yeah,
We will not be selling this fuel.
okay, thank you.
Greg and Steve?
Yeah, I wanted to find out, how old was the original tank, first of all? Second, how close is this to Brush Creek or the drainage there? And is there anything we need to be concerned about regarding proximity to drainage? And third, last question is just, it's a concrete
Brush
tank. You kind of expect it to crack. I'm wondering, is it beyond its life expectancy? What's the story on that?
So the old tank is, I believe, around 10 or 11 years old, and they've been known to have problems as far as the concrete exterior. The new tank is not going to have a concrete exterior. It'll be steel. Proximity to Owl Creek.
Owl Creek, yeah.
No, because it's Brush Creek, it's
I said
Owl
Brush, yeah.
Willow or
It's-
something
Be
come down?
Owl, be Owl.
It's out.
It's Owl Creek.
It's
Owl
Owl
Creek
Creek,
Road
Yes,
right there.
Owl.
It is a ways away from that, and the site has some containment, and then the tank is a double wall containment with monitoring to make sure there's no leaks.
So this is an upgrade in one regard to a better storage technology,
Yes.
Better and bigger.
bigger.
Steve?
Asking Rachel's question in another fashion, will there be cost savings by being able to get a better price break on buying the fuel, of buying a higher volume of fuel if we put in a bigger tank? And that could be, in effect, paying for the project of putting the tank in.
There is some definite scale savings. 10 to 30 cents a gallon is what you can save when you're getting a full-size tanker versus the smaller delivery trucks.
Okay.
Fuel deliveries.
Is there evaporation loss out of the tank?
No.
Okay.
Rachel?
I'm willing to move forward with this. I think if it had presented full cost, before, we would have moved forward with it. It's just that until the bids come in, we never really know. I really second Greg's comments and thoughts. I'm sure the full board about making sure we have really good secondary containment should there be any sort of accidents. But we all know the challenges when I-70 goes down and you can't get trucks up from a given area. This would not be the same as running out of eggs at City Market. It'd be much more severe. And we have growing operations, so I'm supportive.
Rest of the board? Nods?
Great.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we have Brian Pettit, Public Works Director, to talk about the Buttermilk Parking Management Plan. This is a net zero effect on the budget as revenues are expected to cover all of the expenditures.
So this is an item the board's considered several times. In fact, second reading is tomorrow for an IGA with the City of Aspen to change the way we manage parking at Buttermilk. But in order to get that done, there's a couple of things that need to happen. One is we need to install signs and parking meters there. So we have a $10,000 line item for a capital improvement at Buttermilk. I don't think we're going to need all of that. And then the other amount that's talked about is payment to the City of Aspen for 50% of a part-time parking attendant. We expect that revenues at Buttermilk will exceed this cost. And all the interest that we have in that parking lot in the last couple of weeks would indicate that as well. But we need to appropriate it correctly just in case those revenues don't do that.
Good question, Patty?
When are we planning on having it up and running?
It's a good question. The City of Aspen has a second reading. They're having first reading today. So that puts us into July. We've got to order signs and get barriers and concrete in place. My guess is early August. I think we could
Probably
have
at the
something
earliest.
ready to go early August. Yeah.
I'm supportive.
You okay?
It'll be interesting to see how much interest it attracts to rent those long-term.
Yes.
Yeah.
Greg?
Just a question about the barriers. Are portable barriers, are we going to have to remove those every fall and every winter? So they've got to be put in spring to prepare for the summer.
Correct. They make a plastic water-filled barrier that we'll use, so they'll be easy to empty and move around. But yes, that's correct. They'll be removed every fall.
You can empty them and wash the parking lot at the same time.
Yeah. Where will we store them in the winter?
At Public Works, yes.
All right, great. Thanks, Brian. We'll see you tomorrow on that.
Yep.
Next, community development, budget request for scanning.
Hi. Community development has many files from way back in the 70s on planning. We have taken care of most of the building files already, but the planning files have not been scanned. And we thought in preparation for moving to the new building, it would be a good idea to go ahead and get that done. BITS has undertaken, records management, and Susan Sullivan had an estimator come and take a look. And while this is a big ticket item, it is something that is eventually going to need to be done, and this is good timing to try to have it done before we spend the money to not only move, but also then spend the money on the furniture it would take to accommodate those files. Scanning files helps everyone, not just internally, but also externally. Right now, we can so easily send building permit files back and forth between the public who requests files, and it just makes a lot of sense to get this done.
Questions? Rachel?
Yeah. In the memo, it says, if we wait, we will spend more to maintain these hybrid hard copy / electronic collections than we would spend on scanning them. And so I'm kind of wondering, this is a $200,000 request, if we would see a line item repayment of that from cost savings in your department over the next few years, or, I mean, how does that really, how do we measure that the money spent did create the efficiencies and was valuable going forward?
Well, I think right off the bat, just not spending the money on the new building to accommodate the new files and having that room, is something, as well as not moving the files, which is also something as far as that goes. The efficiency of it, I can think about how we can measure that, but I think it definitely would provide efficiency for someone working at their desk, working on files, and also the efficiency for the public. I can take a look at that. We have actually been requesting scanning for a number of years, and now it's kind of down to the line getting it done. So I feel like we could take the files with us. It's just unfortunate if we have to go that direction, but I can definitely look into any kind of line item reduction.
Yeah, no, I was just kind of wondering, because there was a claim there.
Yep.
We'll spend more to do it the old way than if the new way, and so it'd just be nice
Yeah,
to...
Rachel, I appreciate the question, because
Yeah.
we always make these claims about IT, and then how do we measure it, I think is the real question. I think while also difficult to quantify, I think that in the bigger picture, once a document is in electronic format, it's you can reproduce it infinitely at almost no marginal cost, right? And that's really, I doubt that we'd see that kind of savings in terms of efficiencies within the county. What it might do is free up time for employees to be more productive in other areas rather than searching searching paper files or making copies and those sorts of things.
I agree. I think that's just more how it should be presented in the future.
I
that this
understand.
will greatly increase efficiencies and so on and so forth. The moving costs are huge, and I don't think that was really fully put in, or the design costs of accommodating that sort of weight and files. And maybe this is a question for later on, but just today, there seems to have been major cyber attacks across Europe, and some major companies in the United States like Merrick and these guys, and they're all having to pay ransom to get their own files back. And so I'd want to make sure, if we move to that sort of system, is it going to be in the cloud, or is it going to be on a server base we have here, some sort of backup, so that I just want to make sure we're not held ransom to obtain our own files again in the future.
Yeah, and you may have seen this will be a topic for, I think, another meeting. But in terms of that, we are looking at upgrading our security protocols to what's called the two-factor authentication to make it much more difficult to penetrate our networks and lock up our data. And so particularly because we, like almost all organizations, are using more cloud-based applications, that the two-factor authentication is one of the protections against that kind of cyber attack right now.
Thank you.
And Rachel, a better answer really would have been in the field. You know, we can pull up the files at any given time.
Not have to go back to the office.
Well, it's very true for environmental health when they're out in the field using their records on a piece of property and locating on-site wastewater treatment systems or well locations. You know, it's very, very handy. We don't often need them in the field with planning, but it sometimes might be handy. Building, oftentimes, yes. So,
thank you.
Steve was up, and then Greg.
Cindy, once the files are scanned, is the paper then shredded? Or is it put into a long-term deep storage where nobody ever looks at it, but it's still there in case?
Well, again, those are discussion points with BITS. From an archive perspective from the state is loosening up on their archival requirements. We did have to keep them in paper up until now, but my understanding is that they're allowing that to be in digital form now. But, you know, you still have the same concerns that Rachel just mentioned. So that's a decision point we'll have to make, and if I'll work with BITS on that, but I'm sure they'll have further discussions with you.
Okay. And do any of these have historical significance, in which case the paper copy might be worth saving if it's something for an historic building or something?
We do have a list of all the historic buildings, and I'm really talking planning files here, but we'll make sure that those might be archived differently. I know I have pulled aside what I think are historic documents from a planning perspective that are kind of fun. The first map from growth management, that kind of thing, that I feel are important documents to have. But we can definitely take a look at that and make sure that we're not getting rid of historic paperwork.
Personality in our history, or an employee, or a building, or any sort of thing might make it a special piece of paper. Yeah.
Greg?
Just wanted to reiterate what Rachel said regarding security, main thing. And then also just the availability. We talked about the other day when you and I met about making things available for GIS as part of the database, so people can see it. If you're in a part of an area and you want to know what the history is, wouldn't it be great to have that at our fingertips? And it makes a lot of sense. And I am skeptical of the cloud as well. I'm afraid that we're going to lose it all. So I appreciate that part, but I like the idea that you're moving forward. And I think that was probably about it. Yeah, preserving the historic documents, it's important. I know there's some famous signatures on some of the early documents from the county that it's always a surprise to see the names that are on them. It'd be nice to keep that, maybe start building that database as well.
So this is not unusual. I mean, most of our departments have been going to scanning all of the documents. Many have already completed that, and others are still working on it. So it's not like this is an anomaly or unique.
No, we've been holding off a little bit on some of the scanning projects until we had more of an umbrella concept of how we were going to do the electronic records management, because what we didn't want to have is each department with a siloed system that was accessed or indexed differently. And so now that we have that, we've been working through, or at least we have that plan going forward. We've been working through the departments with major paper records, of which ComDev is obviously one, as you can see from the statistics. It has been one of our internal goals to the greatest degree possible to get all our documents into an electronic searchable format so that they can be easily, one, preserved because they can be saved in multiple locations and easily retrieved, which our paper copies generally are not right now. And so it also, we hope, will improve our public transparency because any of these documents on, to Greg's point, any of these properties going back through approvals through the 70s will then be available and searchable online.
Yeah, okay. Everybody comfortable with this? Yep. Yeah. Greg?
I was trying to grasp the last thought based on Rachel's thing there. I think it would be great if after this is put in place and you have some way of bringing us metrics on the efficiency of it, because you do get skeptical about efficiencies that we're going to get. And it would be so nice to have a report someday, not just from your department, but I'm just thinking, we always talk about how we're going to be so much more efficient if we go to this new system. And it would be nice to know, I think we should brag about it, certainly, and tell the public that it worked when it works. And have some, perhaps we can figure out a way to do that in a couple of years, however long it takes to get in place.
Well, I think it all comes around. I mean, when people can search from their house and they don't have to get in the car, drive up here, we're looking at our carbon footprint. We're looking at ways of reducing congestion. Already we see that in the building department world, so that people don't have to make the trip if they just want to search a file that's been scanned. So it's already working. It's already working. But yes, definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you. Was that a yes?
That was a yes.
You can't do that here, Cindy.
We'll think about it.
Next, we have GR Fielding, request for an engineering intern. This request is a net zero request, transferring budget that will not be used for an intern in community development to the engineering area.
Thank you. I'm GR Fielding. I'm the county engineer. In this summer, we were afforded a very great opportunity to utilize an intern that is already familiar with Pickens County, and they had worked for community development last year and worked under the tutelage of our planning engineer. And at the beginning of the summer, we did not have that position filled in community development, and so Cindy had contacted me and asked if I could help backfill that position. And with the number of projects that we have going on right now, we jumped at the opportunity because, in essence, what it was afforded us to not use consulting for some of our inspection on our projects. With how spread out our county is and how spread out some of these projects are, it's difficult to be at some of these projects all the time. In fact, we're usually not at the projects all the time. And because of that, we lose some opportunities. And having an intern in our engineering department, being able to inspect these projects is a really good opportunity to have that person there all the time. Usually to get inspection on projects, we're looking at in the tune of about $100 an hour when we use our consultants. And for an intern, we pay around $15 an hour. So I think it was somewhere, the over-under was 75 hours of inspection and not using a consultant that would pay for this position. In addition, it was already budgeted in community development as well.
We're just switching it around.
Yes.
Any questions?
Sure. Yeah. What level engineering students are you? Where do you get them? And how far along are they in their career path?
Andrews, who's joining us this summer, is a senior environmental engineering student out of Clarkson University. Clarkson University is at the northern tip of New York. And he found us via our last engineer intern that worked under the planning engineer, who happened to be his roommate, who was originally from Aspen. And so he's a very sharp young man, and he's been great. But this opportunity is good because we've got both sides of the spectrum, We have planning, we have design, and we have construction. And so no matter what realm of civil that these students are in, they get to see a little bit of everything.
Great. Good opportunity for us and great opportunity for them.
I'd be glad to get out of New York.
I had only one very random question. How can you trust a student's work? How is their work reviewed? Are crucial decisions going to be depending on their work? Otherwise, I think it's a great idea and it's a great program. I'm not opposed, but I just kind of wanted to answer that question. When you see someone's going to be earning $15 an hour and doing engineering work with us, what's the supervision and review of their work?
That's a great question, and I can give a good example. Andrew's done some of the inspection work on the basalt underpass, and those design plans have been produced. They've been reviewed. They're currently being constructed. He's been used to, say, go out and make sure that the spacing with rebar is correct. And then when there's a judgment call, he goes and he gets in contact with either assistant project engineer or the project engineer. And after you have a couple of those contacts, you have a really good relationship going forward, knowing where those limits and those boundaries are. Anything that might be critical to a future asset or something like that, there's usually a check-in before some sort of major decision is made or anything like that. And in fact, one of the things that it's been so successful already in these first couple months with having a good student, I think that it's a program that we're going to probably look to bring forward in budget process in the future.
Great.
Okay.
I'm okay.
We're okay with that? Great. Thanks, GR.
Thank you.
This is kind of like Santa Claus coming early.
They're lining it up with the quarterlies, that's for sure.
Connie's getting aerobic exercise, having to stand up, sit down.
Next, we have Ann Driggers, our finance director. This is a request for the continuation of a finance position. And Ann will explain better. We had a position that was only budgeted for half of the year with Debbie Nelson's retirement, and this is to continue that as an ongoing full-time position.
Thanks, Connie. Good afternoon. Ann Driggers, Finance Director.
Rich Engelhardt, COO.
So this is my first budget supplement request for you all.
No,
so.
you're out of here.
Okay, all right, thanks.
We're shocked.
So I've been here for about 8 months now, and one of the first things I did was to really assess the situation that we have in the finance department, look at the personnel that we had in place and the systems. And so after, quite an in-depth review, it became apparent to me that we needed to continue the position that we had originally planned on retiring or going away when Debbie retired at the end of this month. There's a number of reasons why. First of all, over the past 6 or 7 years, the number of transactions and the number of items that we're working on and processing has increased about 30%. And at the same time, we've actually reduced the staff of the finance department by about 25%. So it has definitely put us into a sort of a very, kind of over capacity in terms of work environment. And some of our systems and our processes have suffered a little bit. We're not as efficient as we should be. We're not responsive as we should be. There's a lot of overtime that's being worked by employees. We have spent a lot of money on overtime, and they are, I think, suffering a little bit as a result. And also, we could do a better job with our internal controls and backup and cross-training between employees. One example right now is our payroll. We don't have a backup for payroll. So Megan does payroll when she goes on vacation. She, and it's a not very good situation to be in. So we need to improve our internal control environment, provide better operations for support of all the county. in a nutshell. So my request is to continue the position that was projected or planned on being eliminated at the end of this year. So we wouldn't be increasing headcount. We would just be adding budget for a new person, which we would be planning on bringing in at a grade 9, which is less than the grade 11 that currently Debbie is at.
Questions? Rachel?
I think this is fine. I think you're rebuilding the department, so to speak, and it totally makes sense to me. So I'm fine with this. And then I know we have a little bit of a connection coming forward with human services or health department financial needs as well. So.
Right.
Greg?
Just a quick question on why had it been reduced by 2 full-time employees? How did we get to that point?
I might want to take that one because I don't think either Rich or Ann were here for those periods. That was, I think, post-recessionary, Greg, when we were still in recovery. We decided not to replace one employee who actually is deceased while in our service, and then we had reduced headcount previously to address budget shortfalls. At that time, the workload, I think, matched up better because we were also at the same time more constricted in our capital expenditures, projects, all of the above. Not that it wasn't, a strain for the folks in the finance department at the time. But I think to Ann's point, looking at what's happened, over that period, we have had a pretty significant increase in transactions, which I think is pretty directly related to a couple of things. One, the number and scope of projects that we've taken on. I think the obvious question is, well, once those projects are done, what then? However, what we're seeing is, particularly with other projects on the horizon, whether it be the airport project or such, that we've got a fairly long run right now of fairly complex and large projects coming our way. So, and did I get the history wrong, Connie?
There was one other change in that 1.5 finance positions were diverted out of finance into procurement. And that was something that we did not have a dedicated procurement staff in the past. I think the response in the organization has been very positive, that all departments have felt the positive impact of having a dedicated procurement staff, but it has taken resources away from the finance side.
And that is also correct. I forgot that. Thank you, Connie. And so, the other thing that I would mention is we have a major finance project coming up, which is the ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, which is our backbone financial and asset management software. This is a major undertaking for any organization, and there's a lot of work that comes in preparation to make a project like that successful, including there's just a lot of cleanup work. There may be changes to how we structure our charts of accounts and those sorts of things, and that is going to be in addition to the day-to-day work that's already increased by that 29 to 30%.
Good. Anything else? Everyone okay with this?
That's pretty good. I remember John telling me when I first got here that Ann could pretty much handle everything.
Well, he was wrong. I need help.
That's what we said about John.
Yeah.
Okay, I think you're good to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next request is actually something that was missed in the budget carry forwards. It was in the Healthy Community Fund. Back in July of 2016, the board approved funding the startup of Aspen Family Connections. At that time, it was called the Family Resource Center. They've since renamed it. And the plan was to fund part of it with CMP incentives, part out of Human Services Fund balance, and part out of the Healthy Community Fund. And we set aside that budget. We carried it forward from the Human Services Fund from 2016 into 2017, but I missed the piece in the Healthy Community Fund. So this is simply moving the budget forward. We budgeted for the full 2.5 years of this startup program all at once, with the intention of carrying forward year to year as we complete the project. So this is just correcting that mistake.
Okay, questions? That seems okay, Connie, thank you.
Then next we'll have John Lloyd and a request to refurbish the Human Services Data Closet.
Thank you. John Lloyd, Chief Technology Officer.
Why would we want to do it?
Are we doing photos?
Yeah. You can.
Well, I'd like to show the board.
Is the microphone on? Red button?
It's right here. Yes, red's on.
Okay.
I just wanted to show the board what is actually going on at Health and Human Services with their data closet. Over the years, the city of Aspen did all the work of that data closet. And in the last couple of years, we've done that work with consultants. And what occurred to bring this thing to a crux is that we can't add anything to that data closet.
I wouldn't even go near that closet.
It looks like the telephone lines in India.
It's pretty scary. Keep going. There's, I think, another view of it.
Rauschenberg.
Yeah. So it's something that wasn't considered during the regular budgeting cycle, but it's something that we encountered after Nan called us and said she needs to add more people, and we couldn't add more people. So we need to hire a consultant and get this data closet refurbished.
Okay, questions?
I don't think there's any questions.
So my only question is, why do we need to do this? I think it looks perfectly fine.
Well, it is. It has its hilarious moments. I will give it that.
I'm okay. Yeah.
You okay?
Can we see an after picture?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And one last thing would be to kind of double check the roof and the area above that to make sure we won't have any water intrusion. Kind of take that look and see where it lies under the pipes of the building, because it's all been so retrofitted from its original uses. We don't want any sort of flooding like we had at the jailhouse on the servers there. Okay.
We will check that out and I'll let you know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Nan Sundin and Karen Koneman and myself.
You should just stay.
I'll stay right here. This is a request for a finance specialist to be shared by the Human Services and Public Health funds, but I will be overseeing the position, if approved, at the beginning, and I will let Nan and Karen explain better.
Sure, thanks, Connie. And, first of all, we just want to say Connie's done an amazing job for Human Services while she's also working the budget. But what's happening for us, and has been happening for the last 3 years, we've been putting it in our budget narrative that we have a lot of demand for instant financial information to report to grants, to apply for grants, to be sure about our allocations, to be in meetings when we're fighting for allocations, and whatever it is. As you all know, we have a multi-million-dollar budget in Human Services, and about 80% of it we bring in from outside the county. And so most counties our size, Human Services have finance specialists, and it was when public health came in that we were able to have a real conversation about the needs of public health in finance and accounting, and the needs in Human Services. So we're at the place now where we're ready to ask for a position. it would be 75, split 75-25. We both are grant driven, both of our departments, and so we need sort of instant access to financial information. It helps us track, it helps us make sure that we're paying people on time with our contracts, and it would not take the place of accounts payable where they cut the checks, but this is where we could be sure that coding is correct and that we're complying with grant obligations. So do you want to add anything?
If I could say, human services accounting in the state of Colorado is kind of a world unto itself.
It looks like that data room that you just saw.
I recently attended the CGHS-FOA conference, the Colorado Governmental Human Services Accounting Conference, and they've got a great group that works together to support each other because it really is very complex and quite different from other realms. The reporting that has to be done to the state and then that is received back from the state, the funding mechanism, the complexity of it is kind of its own world. So it is something that requires time, time to do it well, time to see how resources can best be used in the county so that we're not letting allocation money go because we're not tapping into the right areas correctly. So it is an important area. And then with the addition of public health, which is similar in many ways, that there are more and more grants. And if I could back up a minute, even on the human services side, the complexity that I have seen increase over the last 3 years is really quite amazing. The number of different grants, the number of different funding sources, has more than tripled from what it was in the past. Then public health adds just a whole other sector of new grants, new opportunities for writing grant requests and funding. Karen was just recently working on one through HCPF, through Medicaid. I guess they don't call themselves that. And so I do think there is a need for someone who is specialized in this area. I'm not able to dedicate more than about 5% of my time to it, and it needs more time being spent on it. So I'll let Karen go ahead and...
Sure. And as Connie mentioned, I think with public health, there is some similarity with how the funding streams come through the state health department, but there's also some unique differences between human services, DHS, and CDPHE, and so I think there's a learning curve around that as well. So we have specific reimbursements that we need to ensure that we're working with the state on monthly. And then in addition, kind of on the grant front, we know that we'll be looking at potential, well, we can assume we might be looking at potential funding cuts coming from the federal and state government, and so we really do need to be poised to be able to look for other funding streams in the future, and I think having a fiscal person that can help us to manage that and to help manage those grants, competitive grants in the future, will be really crucial to be able to provide the services that we'll need to provide.
Looking at your 5-year plan in terms of the split, is that sort of a conservative look because you wait till 2021 till you get into your even split? I'm sure that can be adjusted as you move along.
Yeah, I think right now we all sat down together and tried to work through what we think it might be, and so this is just a guess at the moment. Yeah. And as we go through the budgeting process each year, of course, it will need to be evaluated to see if that's the current situation or if it needs to change from this plan.
And George, to that point, you know, Connie has done an amazing job on a very small percentage of her time doing this. And what appealed to me about this from a strategic perspective is already been talked about, but just to highlight, right now, I think because we don't dedicate as much time as other counties do to these functions, we are probably leaving some money on the table on both the health side and the human services side. We haven't estimated that return necessarily. We've estimated some grants on the health side. And what that split ends up being, I think, will depend on how those revenues and what practices we need to adopt to take advantage of those revenue opportunities are. The other thing that was appealing to me, though, is what we don't know. And what we don't know is what's going to be changing in both of these areas over the next several years. And I think it's entirely possible that our funding opportunities may be shifting in some cases from federal sources to foundations and those sorts of things. And if we're not well positioned and resourced to be agile in pursuing opportunities in this environment, I'm concerned that we're going to miss out more and our community will be damaged. So there's a strategic aspect to this position of building some capacity to deal with that uncertain time that we're coming into and where opportunities might emerge there.
Good. Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. I can really see the logic of this. I can see the value and merit of this. I think we're seeing both departments in a way growing up to a new world. We lived in simpler times before, but whether it's, the services to the human service side and senior agencies, senior grants, growing senior wave within our community, the various programs that are out there that just change all the time. You occasionally read stories in the paper of counties or the state having to do a huge repayment that they hadn't anticipated because they were booking money wrong or they'd used the wrong fund on this thing and things like that. I want to avoid that. I'm sure we have in the past and everything like that, but it has become just eminently more complex. And I know from my experience, I will frequently be emailing Nan to say, can you give me a turnaround on how much we're spending on this or how much we're doing that for testimony or for legislative input or even CCI sending out surveys. Please have your directors fill this out so that they're trying to figure out how to position themselves in the state budget discussions. So I really see the value of doing this. I think we've had a kind of team approach where everyone has stretched fairly thin to be able to try to cover all the bases. And you can do that for a while, but you can't do that forever. And so appreciate your efforts, Connie, and you'll certainly be in a big training role, I'd imagine, as this goes forward. The other thing I'm really wondering is, does any of this then fall under administration and there'd be a possibility of getting some reimbursement from the state for county admin of the human service side? I'm not sure about the health side, but I think that that's part of what administration of the programs is.
Right, it is partially administration, and that's where we were a little bit conservative because we're already overspent in admin, so a lot depends on closeout. I'm happy to say we got our budget letter this week, and we got a hefty increase in admin. It will help a little. Yeah. So we're, by staying on top of it and considering all of our options in the blending and braiding of funding, I think that we can make it work.
Yeah, that's what we built into this budget request. We tried to not overcount revenue funding for the position. But one part that we can be pretty sure of is in the admin closeout at the end of the state fiscal year, 22% of the cost can be covered through that closeout. So the part that is dedicated to human services, 22% we can see coming back through the closeout process. So there is some piece of the position that's covered. And then on the public health side, most of the grants that Karen can write do have a part that she can dedicate towards admin support for the grant. And so depending on the amount of the grants for the year, we could expect to see some support coming in there too.
It might be good to try to establish a ratio that is felt to be appropriate between the person actually administering the new program or doing the program with continued funds versus how much you go to the accounting back of house operations that make this happen. But in general, I'm supportive.
There is one piece of this I just want to bring to your attention, and that is that we have the ability through the resolution approving the Healthy Community Fund to charge out 5% of the fund to pay for administration, and we've been charging 3.5%, part of Mitzi's time and mostly Lisa's time. Charging for Lisa, the administrative assistant. So in this scenario, we are recommending that we charge out the full 5% at this point to start gathering some of the revenue for Mitzi's work on the Healthy Community Fund, and that will free up the general fund funds to help with this position. So I just wanted to make sure that you all note that change.
Yeah, we did not include that in your budget supplemental, but it is something that areas on the backside that we are working to make sure that we make the best use of our funding available.
Okay, are we okay with that?
Good. Great.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks for the description, the detail.
Let's see, we're getting close to the end of this. 2 more to go.
Kathy Chandler for a library request for park benches and blackout curtains.
Thanks, Connie. As she said, I'm Kathy Chandler from the library, and the library has a fund that's separate from the general fund with the county. So what we're asking for is permission to allocate some of the unbudgeted library income for this year in order to finish up a couple of things from the building project. Like John was talking about the county paying as it goes, we were trying to be conservative and put off some things that were optional until we made sure that we had enough money to do the main parts of the library building program. And so now what we'd like to do is circle back and put a couple of park benches out in the front lawn, and we'd also like to add blackout curtains to the meeting room so that it's a more pleasant experience to watch a film in this room during the daylight hours, because the shades that we have, I think they're like 96 or 97%, but they were put in so that you could see through, but they do let an awful lot of light in the room. So we had John Bush was doing his community film program during the winter on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, where we invited the community in to enjoy some of the films that he selected, where he's been doing that in Aspen since the 1960s, I think. And we were really pleased to have him do his film presentations here. But as soon as daylight savings time hit, he said that he was going to have to quit showing the films here because it was just too bright in the room. And we also have family Spanish language family film night once a month, and then just other various community programs where it would be beneficial to have the room more black than it is with these curtains. So what we're proposing is a power operated system that would be gray colored drapes that would kind of mirror these wool drapes in the back, but they would have blackout material in the back, and then they would stack back so that they totally cleared these windows, because you know, the glass on these windows, you can open it totally into the wall, and we didn't want to compromise any of that. So that would necessitate moving this camera that the county owns, but it's used for grassroots. It would have to move back a little bit in order to give us enough stack back area for the drapes. And I think the board, when I wrote the supplemental budget request, the library board hadn't decided on what kind of benches they wanted out front and whether we needed to pour concrete pads or not. So I kind of overestimated on that $10,000 request. I think we'll probably be spending just $2,000 or $3,000 on that to anchor in some nice wooden benches And that's my presentation.
Rachel?
Two questions. So the existing shaded curtains would remain, and this would be an additional layer over top of them?
Yes.
So you could still have this effect on some days, okay? That's good. I think that totally makes sense. Anything that brings more utilization and full-time utilization to the library makes a lot of sense to me. On the benches, I'm a little more hesitant. I really think, A, it's going to be important to coordinate with the city of Aspen in terms of continuity between structural styles and things like that. I mean, we may want some differentiation, that's the library, but they're the ones out there cutting the grass all the time, everything like that. And so,
this side.
are you talking about on this side?
I'm talking the front yard, yeah.
The front yard, okay. I thought you were talking the
sorry,
backyard. So,
sorry.
Okay, that's takes it a lot out. But I was going to say, I think the city usually has a backlog of wait lists of people who would like to do memorial benches to people throughout the town. And you might be able to find a little bit of a funding source there for benches, you know, and to recognize past community leaders and people who like to buy one for a past loved one who's gone away. And I would just like to look at shared resources that way, because I think they're starting to run out of spaces for their benches, and you know, might save the library a little money and just be a good overall community thing.
Steve, then Greg?
I see a possibility of energy savings in terms of, in the wintertime, you could have the blackout curtains block the windows at nighttime even when nobody's in here, and maybe have less heat loss out through the windows, because it is, you know, pretty large expanse of windows. So that would be something to consider, maybe in the design or in the operation of the curtains.
Good idea.
Greg, then Patty?
I want to make sure I'm on. Yep. I love the idea of being able to black this room out. I wanted to point out that the door would also need it too. If you're going to show films in the daytime, that's another blackout situation. But I'm all in favor of it. I think this would make a much better theater if we can darken it. So that's great. As for the benches, I like the idea of putting it out there. Maybe somebody will sponsor one. It's a scary thought, but it might be lucrative.
My comment is just the flowers in front look beautiful.
That came out of this exercise with the library board walking out there, and so on the door, that is a valid observation. And again, as the pay as we go sort of thing, we thought we would start with this and just see how much light leakage we have from that. We're not really trying to make it be, you know, like films at the Radio City Music Hall, but we did want to make it a lot better than what it is right now. And on the benches, the library board had hoped to have one bench that didn't have a back, so that people could kind of look in either direction for conversational purposes. And they picked out really simple wooden benches that they're not very expensive. So I don't know whether, well, actually, now that I think about it, they're pretty far down the path on those. So if, I guess I would need to know if people are really emotionally attached to the idea of having city memorial benches out there as opposed to just putting some in. They really wanted to get things going this summer if they could.
I would say I'd err on the side of just the best quality, so we have something that doesn't need to be replaced in a few years. If it's a lighter weight, cheaper one, then I just want to know if it's going to last. The nice thing about the city ones is they're so stout, they'll be there for a long time.
They certainly will.
There's also, I think, significant maintenance with the city benches. That's why one of the reasons the city's not really putting them up anymore. People may fund them the first time, but the city has to maintain them from there on out.
Yeah,
right.
So
Yeah, they
that's
get sanded and re-varnished periodically.
How's the patio umbrellas coming along?
I know that Jody's working on it. They had donated from one of the county staff members, donated a shade, and so they just need to figure out how to get that attached up there. I'm sure that they're not working on it until the work gets finished on the roof, because the workers are up there all the time.
And I guess that's probably more of a question for Jody in terms of when that project should be completed with the roof.
I think it's later this week, probably. my understanding.
That'd be great if we could have that up there so people could use that space.
We'll get you an update on that.
Yeah, okay. All right, everybody okay with this request? It's coming out of the
Yeah.
library fund?
I can see it going forward.
Okay.
Great, thanks, Kathy. And let's see.
Next, Gary Tenenbaum. This is an open space and trails request. It is not asking for any additional expenditures. It is only recognizing budget for a grant.
Hello, I'm Gary Tenenbaum, Director of Picken County Open Space, and I think this one should be pretty easy since it's a grant that we're receiving, we've all known about, for the Carbon Delta Crested Butte Trail. This is the GOCO grant for the planning. So this is $100,000 that's going towards the planning that's underway for the Carbon Delta Crested Butte Trail.
Questions?
I think we should take it.
Yeah, I think we should take it.
So we're authorizing you to spend the money, Gary,
Cool.
basically.
Well, we're doing it.
I don't think
so.
that's going to be hard.
We're doing it. We're just getting to that point where, between the money that the county has budgeted and this, we'll be getting into the grant money within the next couple months. So we wanted to make it official. Great.
Great, thanks.
Thank
Great,
you.
thanks, Gary.
Okay, that wraps up our supplemental request, and thank you for your time today.
So, we're probably, it's almost July, it's hard to believe. You're probably starting budget process with the department, so would we anticipate, it's hard to anticipate whether we'd be seeing another supplemental request coming in sometime in the third quarter, or?
Yes, we will be doing third quarter supplemental requests in September, and we are kicking off our sorry, distracted with the computer. We are kicking off our budget process. We had one meeting last week with the Flourishing Natural and Built Environment Group, representatives from each department. A great meeting with department heads starting to talk about what they see upcoming for 2018 and sharing ideas. There'll be another meeting this week and then the following week. So staff is starting to ramp up and kick off the 2018 budgeting process. While we're doing that, though, we will continue to bring you quarterly updates on 2017 and where we're at. If there are other supplemental requests that come in throughout the summer, those will be presented in September. And then probably one more wrap-up supplemental round in November, right at the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. Rachel?
Yeah, thank you so much. Two comments. One is that I know we always budget our potential PILT payment conservatively, but I have read that the current budget being submitted has a 15% reduction in the PILT pot, and that given that they haven't really done anything to fix the secure rural schools funding, that means some counties that used to get more secure rural schools will now be digging deeper into the PILT pot. So that, who knows what the final budget will be, but that's kind of what's out there right now. And then secondly, I just wanted to compliment you and John. Not too long ago, we had said, wait a second, we're seeing all these kind of random supplementals this week and that week, and we need to get the big picture. And so while, you can joke it's Christmas in July, on the other hand, it's really good to see them all at once and to see the totality of the requests for the various departments and the effect on the general fund. So I really appreciate the presentation.
Yeah, I really appreciate the effort. Thank you.
One thing I failed to mention is that we did have our E-team review all of these requests also before they came to you. So we've had a number of different layers of vetting and meetings beforehand.
Appreciate that too.
And just to note that tomorrow we will be formally approving all the same list we just went through.
That's right.
Yeah.
Great, well, thank you for all your work on this, Connie, and everyone else.
Thank you.
So we're a little ahead of ourselves. We could take a break now or move on to, we've got some folks here from the airport. We can get them in and out the door. What would the board like to do?
If all the people are here for the airport presentation, maybe we should proceed with that right now and then take our break after.
Okay, let's do that. So this is a airport concessions lease discussion.
Those are my 3 dates that I've submitted this to them. Take it down when I go down. Mr. Kinney, it's so nice to see you again today.
Sorry?
It's so nice to see you again.
It is nice to see you as well.
He was a surprise guest at ACRA this morning.
Hi, Board. My name is Chris Biddy. I'm the airport controller, and I'm here with John Kenny.
John Kenny, Airport Director at Pickens County Airport.
And we have 2 guests here that are with Jedediah Holdings that will give a presentation. So to begin with, today is the work study session of the lease concessionaires out at the airport. Today's presentation is going to go over the opportunities that were out at the airport and that were offered on the RFP, and the lease program, their overall terms, fees, and minimum annual guarantee structure. And then at the end, we'll give you the BOCC action items. First off, the concession opportunities that were out at the airport were food and beverage with an emphasis on the main restaurant, the bar. We've come up with an innovative food delivery service that now we can offer food to secure and non-secure areas of the airport. So it's a good thing. Grab-and-go coffee bar and catering services centralized at the airport. On the retail side, we emphasized on local artist products, Aspen souvenirs, sundries, and health products. For the program and the RFP process, the airport's previous tenant was Parodies. They're one of the largest concessionaires groups in the world. In the end, it just came down to being Aspen Airport was just too small for their business model, just really high overhead, things like that. So we went out to RFP, and we selected a new concessions vendor for both the food and beverage and the retail side. And Jedediah Holdings was the bidder that we selected, was the winner. And we have them here. So the lease parameters are, the term is a 5-year term lease with 2 additional optional renews with agreement on both sides of the party. And things, that's a buffer for terminal projects and items like that. On the fee side, the minimum annual guarantee is going to be $52,000 a year for the food and beverage, and the retail side is going to be $44,200 a year. The minimum annual guarantee has an escalating clause built into it, and we'll go into the revenue sharing scenarios next. So on the food and beverage side for the revenue sharing, right now the MAG is at $52,000 a year. That's going to equal out to be $4,300 a month. And once the gross sales hit $577,000, that's when the revenue sharing starts kicking in. So you'll see us going from 9% all the way up to 12% on that, and that just aligns both the retail concessions and the airport's values together.
Just to be clear on this, when the revenue sharing kicks in, does it start from the first dollar up to $850, or does it start at $5,777,778?
So,
and then you start the sharing, kind of like tax codes.
It's the 0 to 577 is really 9% of the MAG. So the MAG is going to equal. The MAGs are minimum annual guarantee. We're basically saying whether it's $0 or $576, we're guaranteed $52,000 a year.
Okay.
So the real revenue sharing kicks in after that.
And then the next rate doesn't happen until they actually hit $850.
Correct.
Okay, but that next rate, would that go from? It's just going to be on the amount collected between $850 and $1 million.
Correct. On the gross sales.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure. On the retail side, it's slightly different. We've got a $44,200 a year, coming out to $3,600 a month, and the revenue sharing threshold doesn't start till $401,000. So, and that range goes from 11 to 15%. So, as we stated before, Jedediah Holdings was the winner of the RFP, and today we have Mike Guru and Rhea Bowe here. Mike is the CEO and the founder. Rhea is the director of operations, and I'd like you to meet them.
Okay.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, it's okay if I stand. My name is Mike Guru, and I'm the chairman of Jedediah Holdings, Jedediah Corporation. In 1980, March 1980, I opened a small restaurant in the town square in Jackson, Wyoming. We served food there for breakfast and lunch there for 27 years. And we started doing catering for private jets about 15 years ago, and 12 years ago we opened up service at the Jackson Hole Airport. We have since closed our business in town and centered on airport operations. 6 years ago, we took over the concession at the Missoula Airport in Missoula, Montana. So today we operate in Jackson and Missoula. We do food inside the terminal and catering for private jets. We also do a little bit of catering outside as well. When the opportunity came up in Aspen in January, my manager, Rhea Bowe, my operations manager, alerted us to the staff that this would be a great opportunity. And so we got into the process here in Aspen. And just to kind of touch on briefly what Chris was talking about, the MAG, the minimum annual guarantee, revenue guarantee, is something that the airport asked of us, and we agreed to readily. The escalators in the contract are something that we do and we propose at every airport that we work. The reason why is simple. What we want to do is become partners with the airport and with the staff at the airport and with Pitkin County. And so the better we do and the better we can serve our customers and the more money we can make, then the more money they can make. And so we work together on this and then try to make it a win-win situation for both sides on this agreement. And so that's why we propose that above and beyond the MAG. And so that's like I say, it's what we do at the Jackson Airport. Currently, we are paying the full 12% and have been for several months. And, you know, they, like I say, I think that if they were here, they'd tell you that they enjoy that revenue. Last year we paid, or this year we paid so far $300,000 in rent. And by the end of the current fiscal year, we'll be at just a shade under $400,000 that we'll pay in rent. And like I say, we do so willingly and gladly because, like I say, the better we do, the better the airport does, the better the customers do. And so we understand that we have two constituencies there at the airport, the folks that are guests that are flying in, and the local folks who work there. The people we call the locals, the people that are on site every day. And so that's why we have an app and we'll be introducing here. So people that are on the outside of security will be able to order food, and then we'll be able to deliver it out to them. Folks who work at the rent-a-car counters or who work outside are the folks that are greeting people at the airport to get them an opportunity to get something to eat during their busy day. In addition to that, we'll also be offering opportunities outside in the there's a small area in baggage claim that we're still kind of formulating ideas on what we want to do with that. But that's something we'll be working on once we get going. Right now, our main focus is as soon as possible to get started inside the terminal and start serving folks at the airport as best we can. And so the only other thing I wanted to mention before stating your question, I know you're busy, so I don't want to take too much of your time. Let's say one of the other keys, what we've been doing this morning actually, is interviewing local folks to be in our management team. And at each of our airports, we hire a local person who's in charge, who becomes the local face for Jedediah's. Because, frankly, looking at my face isn't something that people like to do that often. So I like to keep it at a minimum. And so Rhea is in charge of all the operations at all our airports. And then I just come in and do things like stand here in front of you all. So we've identified some folks and some great candidates from the local community, and we'll be hopefully deciding one by this Friday, and then getting them on board. And the purpose of that, so I say, just to touch on that, is to become part of the community, to be that local face in the community. It's a big deal. It's one of our values at Jedediah Corporation to do that. You know, whether it's in Missoula, where our manager is also working on some concerts and other things that are, you know, other venues that he works on because he's born and raised in Missoula. I myself have, during my time at our local restaurant, I serve in a community. I've served on our town council, served as a county commissioner, and today I serve as a representative to the Wyoming State Legislature. And so all these things, I only bring them up because we want all our folks who work in all our operations to be part of the local community. So in 7 years, hopefully, when we're standing in front of you, that we will be the local candidate and we will not be viewed as someone from out of town. So that's why we're here, and that's kind of my story, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Well, thank you. Thank you and welcome. I'm just curious about sort of a sampling of your menu. What's sort of your philosophy on your menu? Probably similar to Jackson Hole, but not so much to Missoula, where we're an international resort and more geared towards a healthy diet. And what's your philosophy on that?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. One of the things that we found in our 12 years, especially in Jackson, and Jackson is the closest, you know, comparable. Missoula is kind of an outlier as far as this is, you know, the resort aspect of it. What we found is that yes, the customers do want healthy choices. They want now, given the changing nature of the airline industry, is they want to be able to take those choices with them when they get on the plane. And the picture that's on the screen right now is kind of a graphic depiction of that. One of the things we've learned is the more choices, the better. The more offerings we can make, the better the customers enjoy, the more choices that they have. So what we do is we have a two-prong approach. One is that we do a two-order food service that typically what you'd see, sandwiches, burgers, salads, an array of items that we'll make to order there at the restaurant if your flight's delayed or if you've come early, that you can take advantage of. More often, though, folks realize that when they, especially at a resort destination like Aspen, they're going to get on a plane, fly somewhere, and then change and get onto another plane, usually very quickly. And so what we try to do is provide what we call grab-and-go items that are good, healthy choices for them to take on the plane. Like on the picture on the screen now is a typical example of a fresh fruit that we make or a salad. And then we also do what we call now is we have a new item we call shaker salads, which is like a quinoa salad with, you know, different types of whether it's meat or vegetarian options. We also have an entire gluten-free section in all of our operations, and those are growing rapidly because of the changing tastes of the public. Those are things that they want to have, and we provide them. And so that's, you know, we try to give as well-rounded a selection as we possibly can, and I think that was one of the things that the airport and the staff was really looking for when we presented to them. That was what they were leaning for as well, and I think that was one of the things that helped us on top.
And then in terms of retail, are you looking at utilizing local retailers, local products?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, thanks. I think that is one of the hallmarks of what we do. Over 40% of the items that we sell mostly in Jackson, because we don't do retail in Missoula, but in Jackson, 40% of the items are local items. Local items, either locally produced items or items from the local vendors. Let me give you a couple of examples. The coffee that we serve in Jackson is from a local roasting company. We would anticipate doing the same thing here, pulling them in as partners. Same thing with some of the things we serve in the bar, some of the local products, whether it's local beers, local distilled products, whatever. Those types of things are the things that we'll be searching out for to make it more an Aspen experience. And so we understand that most of the folks that we deal with we're dealing with them on departure. And so we're the last impression that's left on a visitor to what is the preeminent world-class ski resort that you are. And so we want to make sure that experience is a good experience. And then if someone wants to purchase something that memorializes that experience, and that we have that available for them.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Steve?
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. Looks makes me want to fly through the airport to try it out. These maybe are more questions for John, but one would be in the baggage claim area. Would the space to be used would that be the same one down near the baggage service booths?
Yes, Steve, that's the area that they're contemplating. Just not exactly sure how they're going to lay it out just yet, but that will be a service point for those people inside the baggage claim area, where also the meet and greet people assemble.
So if someone did the mobile app thing, that's where they would pick something up over there? And if they were in the ticketing area and ordered something on the mobile app, then would they have to walk around to there, or would it be taken to them in the ticketing area?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, the way we envision that is if you were standing in the queue waiting to get your ticket or get your baggage paid for or whatever, that you could order there and then pick it up on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And then for folks that are either waiting to pick up bags or, like I say, our local constituent, that group, then we would deliver out to that area. And as far as ideas for that area, right now it's been utilized as more just a coffee stand and just water and things like that. We'll definitely have that. It's where we go from there. We're talking about some different things, like, for example, just as an idea, some of the things that we talked about is, a lot of folks arrive late. We've been spent a lot of time just hanging out in your airport, and we see what happens in the evenings when people come in on later flights, especially if they've been delayed. Sometimes they're going to condominiums and they get in late. Then maybe we have some offerings like a bagel tray for the morning with some orange juice and things, just a packaged, not unlike we do for private jet catering, to be available so you could pick something up there, or a cheese and cracker tray or something that you could take back to your condo along with water, juice, and things like that to take along, that you'd have something maybe because the stores are closed, you've arrived late, or just something for convenience grab that you can take with you. A lot of time, I noticed just yesterday, there was a family that showed up and the kids were, I'm hungry, I want to go, and have to wait for the luggage and for the stuff. That maybe there's some things that we could do with that. But that's the types of things that we anticipate doing there.
And do you use the mobile app in Jackson and in Missoula also?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, yes, we do.
Mm-hmm. Now, in those airports, do you have facilities inside and outside of the secure area where people can go up and order at the counter?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, yes. In Jackson, we have this more or less the same setup as is here. In Missoula, we have the full restaurant is outside, or we call the land side. But not for much longer, because they're going through a terminal restoration project that's going to, and we're participating with them in, having the full restaurant and bar be inside security as well. Because that's, when you travel today, in today's travel world, the TSA, the airport management, everyone just gears you to one thing, and that's get your boarding pass, get through security, find your gate, and then relax. Mm-hmm. And so to do those, you have to do those first three things, and then we get to that last point, and that's where we come in. And so it just goes along with the flow of what the security folks want and everyone else is, that they want people to get through security and get on the inside as quickly as they can, or given the space concerns, as soon as they can, as soon as space allows. And so we want to be able to help that and make sure that their experience is a good experience once they're in there.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking that is envisioning, with our prospective new terminal that we're working on, what's it going to look like? What's the food service going to look like? And would your business model work in our new one, or could it help direct how we do the food service in our new terminal?
Well, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, all I would say is we just went through a $40 million renovation of the terminal in Jackson Hole, and it's gone through, it's like a 2-3 year period. It was a big project. We were partnered with the airport on the project. We're very proud to say that we serve food every single day of the construction project, even though the construction project included us. And it went all the way around us. We never missed a day. We never missed a serve. We're very proud of that. And we would, as we embark on the same project or same type of project in Missoula, we look forward to working with them. And if so approved, we would look forward to working with the staff here and working on that same project. And with the experience we have, once again, this is, Chris was speaking before about the previous operator, and I don't talk about the past too much, but one of the things I think is our strength is, this is our wheelhouse. This is the size airport we want to be in. We do not want to be at Denver Airport. We do not wish to grow. This is the exact size of employments that we look for. A little smaller than what the big guys can do. A little, just kind of a sweet spot where we want to be, and a service that we want to try to provide.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? Greg?
Sure. This is impressive. Thank you. I wanted to ask a couple things. One would be about the waste stream. You look in the airports and you see so much plastic stuff being thrown in the trash, and we're making a huge effort here for composting, recycling, thoughtfulness when it comes to the waste stream, and I think this would be a great place to demonstrate that. It's the first part of my question. So, would you have recycling, composting? How is this going to be approached? And then also, we're a foodie community. This is a pretty finicky and high-end sort of culture, and it'll affect your retail. It's going to affect your food choices and what you're serving. It's also going to affect what you sell in your shop. And I know people in the community are very concerned about that. And what I hear now is great. You're obviously very responsive. Culturally, we're a little different from Missoula, and we're a little different from Jackson. And I think you're going to have to be, I'm sure you're already considering these things, but I'd love to hear what you had to say.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, first on the recycling, in Jackson and in our work there, one of the things we are the only airport in Jackson that's actually totally enclosed inside a national park. And so the business about composting waste streams and recycling is a fact of life. It is, I tell people, I joke about it. I can't, if we see a mouse in our kitchen, all I can do is give him a copy of the Wyoming Food Service regulations and send him on his way, because we are in his domain, not the other way around. And so literally we have to go through an entire process, even on that. So we work hard on working through those, and work with, whether it's the Park Service or working with any of our local recycling board, about those types of things. And so those two are, balancing between, like say, the customer's desire to have something that we can put in their hands they can take on the plane and not have it biodegrade before they eat it, versus keeping that waste stream is something we're constantly working on. The second part of your question, in Missoula, we decided, we started in Missoula, we decided we were going to make it just like Jackson, and we were going to have the type of service that we did in Jackson. Didn't work. They wanted something different, and so we do it that way. And what we learned from that experience is that we know that every airport is different, and we anticipate the food that, while the food we serve in Jackson, I'm sure, has a lot of applicability to here and to what we'll do here, but not totally. And so we look forward to having things that are more Aspen-centric, to be things that are more, in that regards the local products that we serve and the products that we serve, and listen to our customers and provide for them. We survey our customers regularly, and actually it's one of the things that we participate with the airport in Jackson on customer surveys at the airport entirely, and would propose, when we sit down and start going to monthly stakeholder meetings, that we work with the airport to do the same thing, and work and see, we'll ask, how are we doing? What do we need to do better? What do we need to do more of, less of? And that's how we can make a better product.
I would just to follow up on that, I'd say, while you're at the airport, surveying the airport, that sounds like a smart thing to do. Hopefully you're getting the same experience in the town, in the restaurants, looking at what people serve, what people eat, the kale salad was, people claim to have invented it here, and it's ubiquitous. Things like that are just such obvious slam dunks. So if people go to the airport and they see something familiar, it's going to give you a lot of cred right off the bat. And if they see, yoga wear at the airport or something comfortable, that it honestly might make a real difference.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner, one of the things we do, and one of the things we've been doing since January when we first came to town, is that Ray and I spend a lot of time in a lot of restaurants, and we stay late, and we come in late on purpose, we stay late, we tip heavily, and then we sit and listen, and we grab the waiter or waitress at the table and say, "We're going to sit down, we want to talk to you. How did you find this job? Where do you live? How do you like living there? How do you find, how much do you get paid?" And we're not stalking, we tell them we're not stalking, and say we just want to find out, because we find that the best way to find out about what folks want in this town is to talk to them about it. And so that's what we've been doing for the last 6 months, and that's what we'll continue to do for the next 7 years.
Great, thank you.
Rachel?
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate all the former questions, and thank you for being here today. I was through the Jackson Airport, I think, last year, and it was really interesting. A couple of thoughts. One is that I was going to suggest that you introduce yourselves, if you haven't already, to Aspen Skiing Company. They can probably give you some insights on the food trends on mountain restaurants in which they get high marks, and then so very many of the guests coming through the airport are ski company guests. So you might find some real synergies there in terms of their marketing efforts or just in general information and history. The second is kind of a concern about workforce. Have you really evaluated the challenge of finding housing, workers given the housing situation? Because it wasn't long ago I was leaving from our airport, and I think it was when I-70 had closed, and a number of the employees for the other operator lived down in Edwards, or literally 60, 80 miles away, and so they were no longer able to travel here to open up in the morning when the state highway got closed with snow conditions or rockfall or things like that. So I just want to make sure you're really aware of what the wages will be to get workforce that's located within the valley.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, yes. One of the when we're asking those questions and talking to folks in the community, yes, we have learned what the wage scale is. We've learned what the living conditions are, and I can tell you that one of the just kudos to you all about the bus system, the transportation system that you have. But we also know that right now that we're not hiring anyone that lives on the other side of that bridge at Glenwood Springs. That we want to make sure that our management personnel, especially, and the folks that we were talking to today, all live close. One in town, one in Snowmass, and one outside, I think is the way it worked.
Two of them were in Basalt, and the other one was in Snowmass.
So close enough so that to know that on a 24/7 basis that that's one of the things that we talk about in our management structure. Having someone local, having someone who's accountable, having someone who's here. In addition to that, working with the entire staff to make sure that they embrace that concept. One of the things that we talk about a lot, and this goes back to the other comments about food and food service, I'm going to tell you right now, we will not serve the best food in Pitkin County. There are so many fantastic restaurants in this community. We'll never, ever be good enough to be in the
But
class.
you have the best airport food.
But what we're going to do, and what I do pledge to you, and Rhea and everyone else in our team will do, is that we're going to make sure that everyone that walks through the Pitkin County Airport has a quality experience. And that we hope to do is by the time the folks leave and get on the plane is that they know that they have met someone that they can consider a friend at the airport, that they've had a good experience, and that they leave here knowing that they have an experience, they can expect an experience at the airport, which is going to be good and commensurate with a world-class resort that you are.
Great. Thank you. And then my last comment was related back to the retail shop a little bit. As this has evolved, and with John coming on board and the contracts coming up, our board wanted to make sure that there really was an integration of locally produced products when possible, or locally designed, although they may be manufactured somewhere else, and things like local authors and things like that that really give it that flair. And, it's not necessarily the airport, but for so many retailers, it's easier to just go with the national book distributor, and just then you have all the national books, and they don't carry this separate author or that, and it loses the local feeling. Now, I mean, I was thinking if I went over to Carl's and looked at some of their gift items, I bet there'd be a number of Aspen trinkets that say made in China on them. But we wanted to try to avoid the feeling that it's just all generic or run-of-the-mill and you can find it anywhere, and to really work to engage, whether it's local jewelry makers, local soaps, anything that, and engage the local retail market as well. So,
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, we do, and I forgot to mention this for your first part of your last question. When we interviewed, and as part of the team that went through this process, was the food and beverage director at the Mountain, and she was on the and so actually got some input already as we went through that process. But yes, we agree on the local products, and one of the things. And once again, not to go into the past too much, but one of the things that we propose to do, in lieu of the 10,000 magazine wall, we have another application that we work with a company called Press Reader. And so when you walk into the restaurant and you go on our Wi-Fi, you'll have the ability to download onto your iPad. Today it's 4,000 newspapers and 500 magazines from all over the world. And that you'll be able to download those. You can download the New York Times, download the Washington Post, whatever it is that you want, your hometown paper, if you're traveling, and be able to download that for free. And that is just part of the service that we provide. And then you'll be able to download. Saves on paper, saves on waste, also gives the customers what they want. So they'll be able to do that, magazines, all that. So those you won't see that as much. And you will see more. What that gives us room for is more local products, more local books, more of those things that you're talking about that are more an Aspen feel to them. Once again, to include that experience, but also give the customers what they want. They want to be able to read their local paper, read whatever. So, but also have room for the local paper, and also have for those local books. So that's definitely what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Greg?
One last short one on the previous topics. Locally sourced food is another big issue, and I know it's seasonal here, but the big thing are the local farms that are coming on, the young people getting into agriculture in a big way in our valley, and they'll talk about trying to source everything on site or within 100 miles, and I know that's not always so easy if you're trying to provide consistency. But that's a big push here, and even to make an attempt at that would be a noble effort.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, in Jackson, we do that. We have we work with local producers with beef products, and we anticipate doing the same here. And for any type of locally sourced products that we can, as we go. Once again, that with the caveat that one of the things that we're charged to do in this contract is to make sure that we serve and have a consistent food service across the board for all our clientele. And so it gets a little bit tight sometimes when you're talking about the volume that we'll do, but we're going to always try, and especially with some items it's easier than others, and we will.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Well, with that, thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a few weeks, I believe.
Yep, our first reading is going to be on the 12th. Is expected to be on the 12th, and the second on the 22nd with the ordinance in hand.
Great.
Great. Very good.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Commissioners, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So
Can we take a break?
we will take a break.
Yeah, and if we come back, we'll be a little bit early, and I would suggest we go to open discussion. I have Nan and Karen here for an update.
Okay, so let's take a 15-minute break. It's back here at 3:30.
Okay.
Greg, watch your watch there if you want to be here at the beginning. If you don't want to miss anything,
You don't want to follow me.
If you want to miss anything, be back at 3:30.
That's not a good idea to follow me. God.
So we're going to move on to open discussion at this point, move a little around on the agenda.
Yeah, thanks, George. I asked Karen and Nan to be here today just to give a brief update on a project that we've been working on with some of our partners around mental health and kind of next steps that have resulted from recent conversations we've had. With that, I'll go and turn it over. Not sure which one is taking me. Karen or Nan, actually.
I will, and Karen will pick up the good pieces that I miss. So, Nan Sundin, Human Services Director, Karen Kuhneman, Public Health Director. We wanted to tell you about a mental health project we're working on with other partners, and basically, what you all know is that mental health and substance abuse have long been in the top 5 of our health issues here in Pickens County. And a year ago, the county community survey came back with almost the lowest score that the county wasn't doing enough about mental health. And so that was a wake-up call for a couple of reasons. One, because the county doesn't do mental health, but we do support mental health and we fund mental health and we are community leaders. So what we did was we pulled together a group of community funders, including the hospital, the city, the ski company, the community foundation, and the schools and the county. And we talked about what could we do if we worked together and pooled our money together to influence a different kind of outcome for mental health. And we spent about 6 months meeting. We created a strategic charter. This was when we brought Andrew Romanoff in as our kickoff speaker. And what we've concluded is that if we pool the funding that we're spending on mental health together and we go out with a common RFP, we might be able to influence what is experienced in our community as fragmented services, good services provided in different places where clients get lost in the gap and where things are not affordable, and the result is that it still remains a significant problem for us. So we've drafted an RFP. We have agreement from the city and the hospital to work with the county, and where, for example, the county will be combining the funds from the Healthy Community Fund, the Sheriff's Office, and the jail, all 3 of us funding mental health in different ways for different reasons. And we're looking at having a meeting on July 10th to finally decide if we're going to go out to RFP in that week or soon afterwards for what we call a continuum of care of services, from prevention to intervention to treatment to aftercare. We have historically provided charitable grants for mental health, but we're hoping that if we use the model that we used with Detox, where we actually went out with RFP, that we can influence the type of service changes that we want and the type of outcomes that we want more than if we just do a charitable grant through the Healthy Community Fund. So what did I not say that?
Just on the front end, as Nan alluded to, mental health and substance use being a community priority, and that came out in the community needs assessment that was done in 2016 through public health. So more data to just support that this is a priority issue. And then there was some front end work talking with some of the providers along that continuum of care from prevention to aftercare about what the gaps were in the community and where the strengths were in the community. And so that's been charted out as well, and really looking at hearing community voice around where they're seeing those assets and gaps, and allowing that to sort of drive the process that Nan spoke about. So there was some community engagement as well to get a good sense of where there was fragmentation, how folks within maybe that continuum of care were feeling like they were getting lost in the system or falling through the cracks, or there wasn't warm handoffs between prevention to aftercare. And so I think from looking at the community's perspective, sometimes there does feel like there's a fragmentation. The quality of services are high, but the whole system is maybe not as fluid for people that live in this community to be able to find where they need to go.
Yeah, I was curious how your interaction was with the nonprofits and the agencies that are currently working in that field, and you answered that a little to some extent. But then I'm also was curious about, as you mentioned, Nan, that you may think about, or we may think about reallocating some of the Healthy Community Fund towards this effort, which means it would be a little less dollars going to those same agencies.
What we're looking at is allocating the same dollars that we're currently providing to mental health substance abuse agencies, but asking them now to come in and apply through an RFP instead of a grant application.
Okay, thanks. I understand.
And if we take Healthy Community Fund dollars and we take the jail dollars and we take what Aspen Valley Hospital is spending as a contract for mental health, and then how much they give to charitable organizations, and also include the city funding, we can put together a nice pot of funding. And then we're all collectively moving toward the same end, instead of each of us having separate contracts for separate things. And John met with the providers. I don't know if you want to talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, we had a chance to meet with the providers and talk about the at least 3 entities' desire to issue an RFP. And obviously, because there's the potential for change, there's some concern around that, but I think there's also an understanding of the effort to try and, as payers for these services, to define what it is that we're looking for and asking those entities to respond. And so I think the model that the board may be more familiar with that's similar is what we did with the detox center when we formed an IGA with the county acting as fiscal agent with the different various municipalities and hospital really paying into the detox, and we went ahead and bid that out, and we did have a change in providers as a result, but we also are getting better results and better service to the law enforcement entities and the folks that are accessing the detox. And so I think our success with that model influenced our discussion here that there may be an opportunity to try and affect similar systematic change in mental health services.
And then you mentioned the ski company. Is the Aspen Community Foundation, the Aspen Foundation, going to be involved in this at all? Because they provide grants to a lot of these same agencies.
At this point, the bulk of the money they have for mental health is donor directed. And so they're watching what we're doing. They've participated in all of the development of the RFP, and they're just not sure if it will work for their donor directed funds, but they do think that it's a tool that could be used for them through grant processes.
Okay, other questions, Rachel?
Yeah, if you could just elaborate a little bit more, what will the RFP be looking for? What do we hope to see come from the community on those lines?
So, what the RFP, we've read it so many times that right now I'm like, what does it ask for? Do you want to answer that?
I can pitch in a couple pieces.
Big.
Maybe we can tag team it. One thing that we're looking for is shared metrics. So I think that's a way to ask the folks that are applying for the RFP to have these shared metrics across the 3 different funding entities. And so we have metrics as simple as we expect you to collaborate with other agencies within the community. There are some very specific metrics on wait times and creating a referral process. And so...
Right, and in particular, we want the vendors that we contract with to be Medicaid credentialed and Medicare credentialed for when they're doing clinical services. Doesn't make sense to be
That's a big
funding
step.
agencies that can't
Get
garner
reimbursement.
other revenues, and those revenues are there. So
So is it that whoever responds and wins the RFP would need to have a physical location in Aspen?
That's
with it certain office hours? I mean, what are we kind of looking to build out of that?
Well, just to step back a little bit, we're tremendously lucky here that we have multiple mental health and substance abuse providers. In a small rural community, what we have here is unusual. Some of it is because of the Healthy Community Fund and the seed money and being able to start programs. But the challenge with that is that they're fragmented and they're not necessarily working together. So we are anticipating that local agencies will apply. There's a possibility that statewide agencies will apply. We're happy to bring on the competition in that way. And but clearly we want services to be provided here locally, and geography is part of what we're looking for. So basically what we're doing is saying, you know, we have some good providers, but the same old kinds of services are not working. We still have the highest rate of suicide in the state. That's unacceptable. It has to change. And we know that agencies are working hard separately. We want them to work together. And that's the biggest change that we're looking to affect.
How are we going to do that?
One of the ways to look at it is a lot of the funding that's been provided by the public entities has been in the form of grants. And the grants haven't really come, you know, to Karen and Nan's points, with the specific expectations about service levels, response times, service models, those sorts of things. It also has spread out our funding among multiple players in a way that, you know, the concern is maybe we've thinned the soup and we haven't really done much to encourage the providers to act in a systematic way to address the mental health needs of the community. And so the RFP will be talking about the kinds of results that we're looking for. It'll give then the providers a chance to respond back with models and service level expectations that would then be embodied in a contractual document, because that's the difficulty with grants. And so it creates more, one, it creates a clearer view of how the system should be working with metrics, and it creates a system for accountability for us to measure whether that system is working the way it said it would, and, you know, then for us to make tweaks either in contracting or funding. What we learned was there's a lot of money locally going in. I think between all the sources we came up with $10 million going in.
Out for right, yeah. They identified about 10 million, and we're funding about altogether. What we looked at was about 700 something thousand.
So we're about 10% roughly.
I just don't get how we have these entities in the community doing X, Y, and Z. They're not doing them together, so we're going to create another entity to bring them together. Well, it could be if we bring somebody who's not already here.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that we're not just creating another entity that's not getting us where we want to go. Because
Patty, the reason I don't think that'll happen is if we were 100% of the funding, that would probably be a likely outcome, but we are a percentage of the funding. We're a significant percentage of the funding, probably significant enough that we believe the players will need to be responsive to that.
will this then take the funding away that's going to those current players?
Potentially.
Potentially.
We worried about that, right, with detox as well.
Yeah.
But it's...
But
I think
Patty,
we have to do something and try it. I'm just concerned that, you know, we're going to be taking money from these guys who are already here, maybe to give to another entity to try to get these guys to do the job we want them to do. And,
what would more likely be the case is that it would be focused in terms of, you know, instead of having multiple entities doing crisis response, let's focus the funding and the expectations and accountability with an entity. I doubt that it would be a new entity or third-party entity, maybe, but I would be very surprised if that were the outcome versus concentrating with an existing entity.
And then that entity would be getting all the funding that's now kind of being dispersed. Right. That's gonna
Well,
be
we've
interesting.
been, we've been a good place. If you wanted to start a nonprofit, this is a good place to start, right? Because there's funding for it. But this being really, I think, our number one health issue, it gives us an opportunity to try to lead a little bit more some of the direction of the services. And
because the manner in which the funds have been going out hasn't been getting us to where we need to go.
It's been haphazard. And I'll just give you an example that I heard in one of the meetings was the Aspen police will pick someone up who's having a mental health emergency and take them to the jail. The jail has a contract with one entity. Aspen police contract with a different agency. So Aspen police call their agency to come to respond to the jail where they are supposed to be working with another entity. And it gets confusing. And then if that person is Medicaid, agency one doesn't take them, so they get a warm handoff anyway. So what happens is all of the referring parties were in agreement that we have to do something because we can't figure out who to call when.
Right. In the middle of that is the person in the crisis.
And in the middle of that is someone who needs help.
Already needs to be stable and we're putting them into a crisis.
So this is our effort to try to get out in front of that and be in agreement with who we're going to contract. Who are we going to call for this? Who are we going to call for this?
It's making a matter of making somebody step up to the plate.
But your concerns are correct because there could be a change then in that concentration. But I think the way that we looked at it is it's not that our providers have necessarily been, it's not that they're doing a poor job providing the service, but as the folks writing the check, have we done a good job defining our expectations and, having some accountability? And we think this is about the folks who are writing the checks doing a better job, being more fiscally responsible and more programmatically responsible. And so that's what the effort really is.
Rachel?
Yeah, this continues to be an effort to understand it better, not to be poking holes or anything. But if currently these various agencies are all getting a grant, which is just a small portion of their budget towards these sort of goals, is it going to be one much bigger contract where there's no private fundraising on their side? I mean, right now, again, it's a share of someone's budget. If I say out of mental health by saying English for Action, English in Action gets a grant from us and they raise all sorts of other money and they do great work. And on the mental health side, they're getting a grant from us and they're raising money elsewhere and they're doing great work. Would this make us more responsible for 100% of the funding for the program we're requesting in the RFP, or we're just saying this chunk of money will be available if you win the RFP, and you're still going to need to be bringing in your outside sources of funds, whether it's insurance recovery or whatever, to sustain the rest of the program?
Yes, the second, and also the RFP asks what other resources are you bringing to the table. So it is important, and we do recognize that we're a smaller portion, but collectively, it's a big chunk of money. And I think the one thing about it is that they need the local dollars to leverage other dollars, and so it's attractive enough to want to go for.
Thank you.
So you got on our RFPs out currently?
We have a draft,
You have a
and
draft.
on July 10th, we bring the funding collaborative back for a final review before we release it. We wanted to let you all know.
Yeah, and then when do you anticipate the time frame for the RFPs to come back to you, and what sort of timelines have you put together?
We're looking at giving them a month and having the RFPs come back in September and having a selection, and then issuing the contracts for 2018. And one thing that I forgot to say is that the funding collaborative has asked Pickens County to be the fiscal agent, similar to how we are with the detox. So that's in there as well.
So we'll see you back here in September-ish.
Yeah, and so operationally, we have to see what the responses are and that the partners all agree, to continue the joint funding based on those responses. That would result in an intergovernmental agreement similar to what we did in detox. So that would be the public action that you would take because the funds that we're talking about have already been appropriated. We don't anticipate it being a budget change at this point. There may be changes coming in the future as we continue these conversations, but that would be the next formal action that would come in front of you guys.
All right.
I just wanted to say, as you guys know, I go to state meetings all the time, and what I'm hearing is that the issues that we're having around mental health are happening statewide, and that other counties like Boulder and Larimer and Mesa and other counties have gotten out in front of this just the way we're trying to now. So I think it's going to be a trend statewide that's happening. We're just at the beginning of it.
All right, great. Well, thank you.
Yeah, good thing we got the new financial officer. Exactly. Okay,
thanks, guys. All right, let's see. We're going to move on to an assessment of tree removal regulations.
I like the talking animals and the.
What's that, Patty?
I like the talking animals in the tree.
I know, isn't that a cute guide we made?
Yeah, I like that.
I like that one too. Mike Kramer with Pickens County Planning Staff, and Cindy had a scheduling conflict, so you get me this afternoon. And this is obviously a work session to discuss tree removal permitting and our process. And as I understand, a concerned citizen came into the board a couple weeks ago and was concerned about the permitting process, and a work session was requested by the commissioners that we're doing today. So I thought I'd give a little bit of background on our process and what the code says, and maybe explain those guides a little bit. And I can talk about a potential third-party review if the county wanted to go that route. So tree removal is located in Chapter 7 of our land use code. And I'll get into a few numbers, but basically when a 6-inch diameter at breast height DBH tree gets removed with an aggregate of 24 inches, a permit is required. Also, if a single tree of 12 inches of DBH gets removed, a permit is required for that. So you can think about it as, 5 trees of small diameter totaling 24 inches. A permit is processed and required of a property owner. If a single tree of just 12 inches is going to be removed on a property, a permit is applied for and processed by our department. There are certain aspects of the tree code that speak to mitigation, and just some background too. I think it was in 2015 the board did community development processed a code amendment, and an ordinance was adopted amending our tree regulations, and it's basically current, and we follow those procedures. We are one of the only counties in Colorado and potentially nationwide in our searches that does tree permits and mitigation. And what that word mitigation means is that when trees come out for development, they are required to be planted. Just some background on that too is that when a 12-inch tree, for example, is removed, a property owner could plant 6 2-inch trees to satisfy the mitigation. They don't have to be the exact same species. For example, if a property owner took out 2 spruce trees, they could mitigate with smaller aspen trees. So it's very site specific, and the idea being that we don't want to replant non-native species, and we want alpine species and non-natives to be not planted in our county, obviously. So that's basically how it works, and 99% of the time it works well. Property owners apply for permits, or arborists. Obviously Aspen Tree Service is a big company in our valley that applies for permits with us, and it in general works really well. There are certain situations, as you can imagine, where property owners have complicated tree removal permit applications. And as you know, as we have spoken about recently on Red Mountain, and in certain cases, the county could adopt a third-party review arborist to review that permit specialist. In community development, we currently have 2 licensed landscape architects, which is really great. And both Tammy Cochin and Larissa Lalonde review our tree permits. And like I said, 99% of them we understand, comprehend, can adequately review against the code in our process. There are certain situations where they are complicated and staff may question what the tree needs to be removed, the purpose for it. If there's maybe if the arborist maybe proposes a weird disease that we haven't heard of before, or something ailing the tree that we just don't have expertise on, community development staff could engage a third party to review that permit and then provide direction to us. And there's certain pros and cons to doing that. Obviously, the pros are we get a better product when that third party review comes in, and it helps staff understand the proposal. The cons of that are a few. One is it costs money, obviously. The permit process might take a little bit longer for that arborist to review. And there's a potential that someone applying for a tree permit might be deterred if they think that if the applicant has to absorb that cost for a third-party review. And as I said, that is not a common place in our permitting and review of tree permits. These are kind of the 1% of ones that would come in. So those are a few of the pros and cons. And obviously the budgetary impacts on it are could be substantial if we did that all the time. I don't think we're looking to do that all the time, and I don't think we would recommend that, but we would certainly look to the board for direction on it. A couple of the attachments that you have, attachment A, and then which is a guide, and that's basically our handout to the public, and it was developed so that there could be a quick snapshot of when a permit is required, when it's not, and when mitigation is required and when it's not, and that has worked really well for us. The community seems to respond well to pictures and guides and snapshots and bullet points, so that's one of our tools. The other attachment you'll see, they're a little bit more detailed and boring, but that's our tree permit application form, and a property owner or a tree removal company will fill this out and submit it to us. Tree removal permits take no longer than a week to process. And if anybody has any questions and they want to dig into the code, we certainly can give them attachment B, and they can read about how the code requires tree permits and when mitigation is required. So I'll stop talking, and if you have any questions, I can hopefully answer them.
Patty?
Yeah, as we know, Janae Kirk's concern was really the conflict of interest, that you have the tree cutting company who's going to be doing the job determining the health of the trees that they're going to be cutting down as part of the job that they want to do. And I can totally understand that. I don't think community development should be responsible for paying for the third-party arborist. I think if there's a complex tree removal permit application that's incumbent upon the permittee, the person applying for the submitting the application, to hire a third party, somebody who's not the arborist at Aspen Tree Service when Aspen Tree Service is going to be doing the cutting. That's not clean for me. And like you said, there might be just a small percent of these complicated applications, something new, or a lot of trees, a big application, that are going to have impacts to the neighborhood. And I don't think we want to see people coming in and just cutting down trees because, oh, my tree cutting guy said it's a disease, so we're whacking that tree. I think we need to have a little more substantiated decision-making in this. So that's
Mike,
kind of where I'd like to go.
Okay, thanks. Can you come up with any other examples where we may be utilizing a third party through ComDev?
I can. We actually had discussion on that exact topic when the concerned citizen talked about conflict of interest. And I think the way that ComDev came down was that in general, it's no different than when an engineering or a geotech does an analysis of a site for development for a house, and then also implements those recommendations and assessments in the development process. That's a very common thing that happens and that we see in community development with land use applications. So that's about the best example I can give. I in general, don't see a conflict with someone providing an assessment and doing the work based on this example that we just gave.
So the applicant, in those cases, the applicant pays for that third party?
Well, and that's just it. When there is a question that comes up, we do have an engineering firm on retainer with our department that if we see something that doesn't smell right or at our discretion, we can call up that engineering firm to review it as a third party. So that maybe that's a little bit different than a conflict of interest, and I probably have to look to John to maybe help in that discussion of definition of conflict of interest. But I don't see it in that capacity.
Yeah, I mean, the other examples I can come up with perhaps is, let's say, avalanche mitigation or even wildlife, looking at wildlife impacts, where we would bring in a third party or the applicant would bring in a third party?
Well, in those two instances, wildlife might be the best one to give an example on. So commonly what we'll see in site plan applications that the board reviews is someone will hire a wildlife biologist and they'll do an assessment on the property. Community development's tool then is to refer that out to Colorado Parks and Wildlife for their assessment. And then we have, two competing professionals that provide information, and we make the best decision we can. In terms of avalanche mitigation, that's a really good example too. There are only a couple specialists in the state of Colorado that provide avalanche assessments, and when a property is located in an avalanche area, that individual will provide an assessment. ComDev staff gets to review it, and if we don't understand it, or if we feel that we need someone with more expertise than us to challenge this, we can hire a third party to assess that.
We pay for that.
So the county's paying for that.
We will pay for that.
My question real quick, George, to just jump in with the same thing I was saying is, but I think it's different when it's a diseased tree than an engineering feat, because there's provisions in codes for engineering specs, like for avalanche and wall thickness and angles and all that. But with a tree, it could be really subjective. Oh, that aspen tree's got cankers on it. Well, is it that? Because it looks like it, but I just think it's a little grayer area. So I think when we have a substantial project for tree removal, and they're saying that we really, because you don't necessarily have to mitigate if the trees are diseased.
That's correct, yeah.
So if am I going to mitigate for removing 40 trees when I can have somebody come in and deem them all as sick? I'm not comfortable with that.
Rachel?
Well, I think you're really bringing up some good points on this, Patty. I appreciate that very much. I mean, what that points out to me is maybe there should be a differentiation in the code between, I'm not going to say non-consequential, below a certain threshold, versus
have a dividing point.
tree removal above a certain threshold. So I can see that you might want to create a differentiation there if it's someone coming in for the permit for the 2 trees. But you're right, there's a real financial incentive when someone's removing 40 trees to be able to have more of them declared diseased and cost-free versus, X many healthy. And just some little shading around the margins can make a difference there. I'm sitting here kind of recalling that when the Drosty property was still under evaluation, we hired a separate wildlife biologist to be able to give us better information about the placement of the home sites and things like that. So I don't think it's out of bounds. I think it would be kind of rare when we do have to hire a third party. But I want to make sure our staff feels that they, can get the expertise they need on these areas, similar to, occasionally our attorney will tell us he wants the water law opinion from someone special. And that's just kind of built into their budget to have a little bit of contingency for times like that. For me, kind of looking at the broader package, I think that it might be valuable for the contract itself to be revised so that they have to give you more information about the contractor. Or, maybe that's part of this, that the contractor has to sign that they understand the Pickens County tree removal codes and standards, and they'll be held to their assessment of were the trees diseased or not, that sort of thing. I don't know, but maybe there's something within that, because you're getting the contractor's name and their email, but not necessarily their resume or how long they're in business, or have there been Better Business Bureau complaints about them, or, so maybe there's something there that would help improve ours. The other, thing I just want to mention kind of more in passing is, but I'm a member of the Arbor Day Foundation and have been for a long time since I was on the city, and they were Tree City USA. And they recently put out a mailer kind of asking people to create links to their website wherever possible for better tree care, for better tree health, and just to spread the information. And that might be something, a link that we would like to provide in our code. Here's information about healthy tree management. It's amazing how few people really know how to prune a tree correctly for the 20-year growth versus just let's just cut some branches off and see where it goes, or top it, or just horrible. Just at Hunter Creek, I was gone last week. I came back and they'd had somebody run around and do all the juniper bushes. Well, I always trim the ones in front of my window, and they're kind of really nice. And I came back to find them just kind of buzz cut, like they were going in the military, and a bunch of raw branches showing and no greenery. And then they left all the trimmings on the ground. So it's like, these guys were just given a saw and told to go cut the bushes. They didn't trim the bushes. They didn't shape them with the eye towards future growth. So anyhow, that link with Arbor Day Foundation, I think, could be valuable just for education and offer people resources. And, I want to be careful, two last things, just to not overreact, because, there's the old expression that bad cases make for bad law. And when you try to just keep, pushing it down, you're going to have the 95% of people who do everything right kind of going through extra hoops because of the 5% of people who don't. And so for me, it's more a matter of how do you create the ability to catch the 5% who don't. And so that's where I'm thinking, if we start to distinguish between a minor tree permit application and a significant tree permit application, we might be able to create some differentiation and maybe some different standards there. When you're taking 5 trees out on 35 acres, is that a big deal? If you're taking,
right. I think there's a number of trees that
the number and the lot size
and the visual
and some things like that. And then what was I going to think? The last thing we talked about a little bit, John Peacock, I think in your absence, or maybe when we were talking about the CCI legislative requests, and it was just tossed out there that, well, maybe we should ask for statutory authority for the county to issue business licenses. And that they tried to run that up the flagpole before at CCI when Peter Runyon was the Eagle County Commissioner, and it didn't go anywhere. But that's how the city is doing the 21-year age for sales to cigarette smokes, is through their business licensing of retailers. And we don't have statutory authority to approach it in that manner. But also this sort of thing, that you would have to have a business license to remove trees in Pickens County. You wouldn't maybe have to do business licenses for everyone, but it would be a way to have more control of bringing people in from out of county or not. I do not know. But it did strike me that I was wondering if there might be a tie-in with a business license, ability to operate in the county and be certified, that, we haven't had past complaints, we things like that. So that did strike that. I don't know if it's worth pursuing or not. We'll talk about those tomorrow anyway.
Just wondering briefly, if a tree is diseased, can we make applicants demonstrate that it's diseased before they cut?
Yes.
Is it as simple as saying, if you're going to claim this is diseased and you want to remove it for that reason, you have to go to demonstrate it before you cut it?
They have to have an arborist, I think, review it, and generally those
But there's the rub, is that if the arborist is the guy cutting the trees, then he's got an incentive to.
For the tree cutting company.
So can it go farther? Can it go back for a review, as part of the permitting process, so that there is someone else looking who doesn't have a financial incentive to cut the tree?
Well, I think we could do that and say we want to, under this provisions, they're going to remove X amount of trees with this visual impact, and this is the total caliper of the trees. Then that's significant enough. We need a third party, and the applicant has to pay for that person to come in, review the trees, and that person cannot be associated with the tree cutting company. That's, I think, how we clean it up.
Doesn't sound too complicated to me, but I don't know. unforeseen
I think that solves the
consequences.
problem. So if I want to come in and cut down 2 trees in my yard and they're this big, and yeah.
Right, but if it's
Steve?
Mike, I was wondering if there's any provisions for ranches, big ranches. Like in my life, I've cut down hundreds of trees on our ranch
Oh, we're getting you.
because they're
They were the first
they're
example.
usually in the way of a ditch or a fence, or they're leaning over a road and they're a danger.
You don't have to mitigate for trees that are considered a nuisance.
And you cut it down and you don't replace it because there's 10,000 or 100,000 other trees on the ranch, and one tree is really
What's all
insignificant.
coming in here?
But so my question is, are there any differences in the code for
We have an application. We have an
a
applicant coming
working
in.
ranch where
Interview.
cutting trees is just part of doing business there?
There is, and Patty hit on it. The nuisance provision basically is what's applicable. And if a tree is a danger to a structure or to life safety, it can get removed. It can get removed quickly too. And commonly, what we'll see is the arborists call and say, "Hey, this is going to fall on a house," or "This is going to be in a road right of way. This needs to come down immediately." They'll send a picture and we'll let it happen. They'll apply for the permit after the fact. In the situation of large acreages and ranches, our department has traditionally not permitted when a ditch company removes for, burning the ditch every year. It would be almost impossible to mitigate, and where would they mitigate? So we certainly acknowledge that. And I'm not an arborist, I'm a planner, so I don't want to beat up on the arborist too much in our discussion. But I should point out, and this was pointed out to me when we were writing this memo, is that an arborist, to get that title, has to be certified, and they are certified under, I think, a program and a protocol, and they have certain objectives that they have to meet when they're performing an assessment of tree evaluation. So I would hope that our Pickens County arborists, which are only a few, we don't have very many tree service companies with certified arborists, I hope that they're on the up and up and that they are telling us the truth. And if there is some odd Asian butterfly that has flown in and landed in a tree, and this is a new disease that we're experiencing, we most certainly want to have the latitude to call up another arborist and say, we need this reviewed to make sure this is correct.
Or if there's significant trees in a view plane and we're questioning whether or not those trees are sick or whether they're blocking the view.
Very good point. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that the staff has the ability to drill down a little bit, not drill in, but drill down, if there's any questions, and then if there are questions, to bring in a third party.
That's correct. And I guess as a decision point, if I have to make a recommendation, I don't think we need a third party on every tree removal permit that is submitted to the county. And Rachel's point about significant versus not significant, and Patty's point about land disturbance and view planes and size of the removal would come into consideration if Pickens County wanted to hire this third party to review. I think those are really the key discussion
points. Could we not make,
points.
though, that responsibility on the applicant if they're doing a huge application? I think we could, and say you need to have a third party, neutral party, come in and give us documentation that these trees are actually sick or trespassing or nuisance, or if it's a significant application.
So I'm hearing a fairly good consensus in terms of trying to come up with different criteria when staff would want to look at bringing in a third-party review. And I would agree, those are, in those cases where it's going to be so large or so impactful, those applicants, they've got a litany of architects, planners, attorneys, engineers, so I don't see this as a hardship in terms of having them have to pay for that in those very unusual, specific, infrequent circumstances.
So clearly, this wouldn't be after ComDev has said, we approve your building envelope location here, and this is your house here, and they say, well, these are the 15, 25, 30 trees we'll have to remove to build our physical house. Are they then subject to the replacement of those trees where the house itself is going?
Yes.
Okay, but that wouldn't be debatable in the classic sense of whether they're diseased or not, or would
No, they could claim some of those are
claim
diseased.
some of those are diseased.
They could, but when staff does our site visit and we don't see a disease or an issue with the trees, then there's no talk of not mitigation. There's
they
you
mitigate.
mitigate on the property, and that's what the rules are. Yeah.
Okay. So that was the final question, is like, who pays? And would we put in any sort of not to exceed amount? Or, I have no idea how much, or are we looking at just as if you're having to do avalanche mitigation, so you have to bring in and pay for your extra?
That's what I think.
Okay. I do note the staff's concern that, this could get to a point of more illegal bandit tree cutting if that seems too expensive. But I think as long as we kind of make those criteria very clear, it should be something we can track. See how it works out.
All right, so you want to work that up and come back to us?
Just don't plant any trees in your building envelopes.
Yeah, we can outline those factors we talked about and bring them back to the board.
All right, great, thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
We're supposed to have a interview coming in at 4:15.
Yeah. Joanna, do you know where your interviewee is?
Do I? No, I do not. Probably stuck in traffic like everyone else today.
Are we going to interview Joey?
Yeah, let's interview Joey.
I hope I've already got the job.
We don't interview. The public does.
Yeah, if our candidate hasn't showed up yet, we had one more open discussion item, which was to talk about wildfire update and fire ban, or there is no fire ban update, but just
there's a fire ban today in Garfield County.
In Garfield County, and that's why we thought it'd be appropriate to talk about
we don't have one?
where are we in evaluating where our community's at. Sorry for that tee up, Joe. That wasn't as elegant as it should have been.
So open discussion on the current situation with fire
and status. I just thought I'd update you, John's request today, to tell you where we are with wildfire or potential wildfire in Pitkin County. Last Wednesday, we had our Public Safety Council meeting where we had a briefing from Doug Paul, who's with the BLM, who told us that, at least as of then, hot, dry temperatures, windy conditions for the next, at that time, he said about 30 days. He predicts that we will eventually be in conditions that might warrant a ban. We just don't know when. My history with a ban or any kind of restrictions is to rely on science, not guesswork or what holiday is coming up or how many beds are booked. It's based on public safety. And right now the science, which the main science is the ERC, energy release component, how quickly certain plants like junipers and piñons burn, or how quickly a fire could start. And right now we are approaching the level that I use 90 as the level that I usually get concerned about, and the monitoring station is at right now on the Crown Mountain. So as of today, Garfield County has put a stage 1 restriction in place. That is in the handout that we just gave. Stage 1 is kind of a warning shot that this is coming, and be prepared for further restrictions. In my history, the last ban that we had was 2011 in April. We had a fire breakout east of town. It was incredibly dry, and that's the last ban we had. But it is my history and experience with burns and restrictions that it is entirely a public relations campaign. Information, flooding in various languages and at trailheads and campgrounds, etc. Newspaper articles. We will bombard you with information. The weakness comes when different counties or jurisdictions or municipalities don't join the ban, or a federal agency doesn't join the ban. When you're out there camping, there's no bright line that says Pitkin County's here, Eagle County's there, burn, don't ban, or burn, don't burn. So my suggestion is that as this creeps up valley, we have a uniform fire ban or restriction in place that matches our adjoining counties. So Thursday, I'm meeting with the fire chiefs in the district in Picken County, and we're going to continue this discussion on what the future looks like. But I think this is a warning to our citizens that I think this is probably going to happen. I can't say when. That will be science will tell us when. A few raindrops are not going to fix the problem right now, and I just want to make clear to the people listening and the people that I work for that don't let a rainstorm fool you. This needs to be soaking rain for several days, and there's no forecast of that. So that's our immediate plan. Valerie has revised all the information from our last ban, and we are updating it now. As I said, this is a PR campaign more than anything else. Preventing a forest fire from a dry lightning strike is out of my capabilities. Even a human start is out of my capabilities. So it will be a PR ad, a PR campaign specifically.
So, Joey, or whomever, I know the BLM has issued a sort of a quasi-fire ban in terms of no open fires, though they're still allowing fires in designated fire pits and places. I haven't seen anything coming out of the White River National Forest. I'm sure you've been discussing that with them. And then my other question is, next week is the 4th of July. Any sort of speculation or options in terms of fireworks?
In the order received, George, first of all, we have had confusion in the past between BLM and the Forest Service. One has a ban or a restriction in place and the other one doesn't. So when we do this, and we've learned from that, so I think it'll be an easy sell when we do this that we present a united front with Picken County, Forest Service, and BLM all sharing the same philosophy on the ban. So I hope that will prevent any confusion. As far as the second question goes, both Valerie and I have reached out individually to ACRA, who sponsors our fireworks display, and have told them, because I don't want to be the Grinch who stole 4th of July, that this decision may be made on the 2nd or 3rd. So please start thinking of a contingency now for fireworks, whether it be a laser show or move them to the golf course or whatever plan B they have will be run through this goose again, and we will make a decision on that. So I've given them a heads up because I have been caught in that situation before, and I don't want to be there again.
Great, thanks, Joey.
Excuse me?
I said thank you.
You're welcome.
What I think is makes me really nervous is the fireworks stands in Garfield County on the highway. I mean, because, there's nothing that says you can't take these out of the county limits. And you're driving by and you're coming up here and you're like, no, they're not going to do fireworks in Aspen. I'm bringing my own. And that is something I think we need to really get the public information out there that, if we decide that we are not having fireworks, it means you cannot have fireworks in your front yard. I mean, because those are the ones, when they're coming off in my neighborhood and going up over Smuggler.
Well, it's interesting because I've had that conversation with Garfield County commissioners before. So if Garfield County has a ban, and I've asked the commissioners in years past, if you have a ban, why don't you just ban the sale of fireworks? Never really got a great response.
Yeah, I think the way we had that off, George, is through a variable message display board at the entrance of Picken County that says fire ban or restrictions in place, no fireworks, and meaning that if you bought them down there, they're illegal up here.
And no 35-foot trucks.
I've heard that stand exists so people could go to Lake Powell or whatever with their fireworks, but frankly, it would be great if they wouldn't issue that permit.
Yeah.
But
Rachel?
Yeah, well, a couple things. Joey, you start telling us about the ERC component, and you get worried around 90, but you didn't tell us where it is now.
What is our crown?
It's very close.
88, 89, something.
And down Valley, Picken County, toward Carbondale Fire, the Garfield definitely is higher than the 90. And I just talked to Ron Leach this morning, and the Picken County areas down there, are not
pushing it.
quite there yet, but
But
it's
they're-
it's creeping up.
Yeah, it's dry.
On this
Okay,
wind.
yeah, because I've seen mostly at water conferences, presentations with Nolan Duskin, who's the state meteorologist, and he'll tell you 75% of all the precipitation we get in Colorado outside of the winter when it freezes just evaporates, is gone, like literally within 24 hours or less. So, it's very deceptive.
And it won't take long if we have, as I said, we measure at the crown, not up here. If this is at 85 now, it won't take long to get to 90.
Yeah.
Because of what you just said. The evaporation is just so quick.
So quick. And I was reading, I believe it was the Aspen Times yesterday, and saw an ad that I believe you guys had placed. I don't know if it was placed through Pat Bingham or not. Kind of small. And it talked about the firework ban, and that fireworks that are illegal are ones that fly or shoot or do this or that. And I would just say I would pay for placement to move that ad more forward in the papers. It was really pretty buried, and see if there's a way to get a bigger space, especially for next week, for the 4th of July week. I mean, that should be a Monday edition as far up as we can get it, and things like that, because people will be picking those up, particularly just to find out what the events are and things like that.
Actually, Rachel, we've got that as a full-page ad on the 4th of July. It was not supposed to be in yesterday's paper.
Okay, it was a little teeny.
I saw it.
Okay.
We did not place that, but it will be run on the 4th of July.
Well, it's
full
nice if
page.
they're doing that as a public service for us.
It was
we're
free.
getting it in there somewhere, but okay, well, that's very good. I'm glad to hear that.
And I guess I just want to make you aware that I will probably be conservative with this. I do not think it's worth trees and threat of our town for an annual display.
Have you talked with Snowmass as well? Because they're advertising firework.
They're doing them at
display
Fanny Hill.
as
They brought up at
well.
Acra
I
today.
have not, but I will reach out to Brian. I'm sure our restriction will cover them.
Right, that's what I'm saying, the heads up, though, because they're starting to
I
advertise.
had
that.
forgotten that they have their own display.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
And the other entity that's actually not in Pickens County is the Roaring Fork Club usually does fireworks.
That actually is in Pickens County.
Oh, it
and we
is.
work
Where they
with-
do it, where they hold it, it's in Pickens County?
I spoke to Scott Thompson this
Oh.
morning. He's
Salt, but
on
it's
his
in
way
Pickens.
back. He will be at the Thursday meeting, so we'll talk about that. I
Did a
just
public
got off the
safety
phone.
council meeting?
That is a fire chief's meeting,
chief's meeting.
and a forest service person will be there.
Karen
and-
Schroyer and BLM will be there as well.
Great.
And maybe check with ComDev to see if they've issued any special events permits for private parties during this time period, to let them know that fireworks would not be allowed, or if they were planned, they would not be allowed now.
Well, those approvals have to come through the fire marshal in any public, any
I'm
special
just
event
thinking
with
somebody could have
fireworks.
applied for a permit a month and a half ago and gotten it to have a larger, gathering at their home or things like that. I just don't know. I just like to check with.
And I believe, Rachel, even if we go to stage one, there is a provision for commercial, professional fireworks displays. So there is a provision in that, but I'm also concerned about perception.
Yeah.
And that's where we all
Just saw
come in.
some, so I can do mine.
Right, that's where we all come in, and that's where my conservative behavior is going to come into play, is I think we should be a model for this, and we won't be popular, but we'll be
We've
safe.
been there before. We can handle it.
You'd be less popular if you didn't do anything. We had a drastic
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah, so I
Great-
think
great
we're all in
update.
agreement on that.
Yeah, good.
Thank you
Anything
for
else?
the update.
Thank you guys
Any
for
more
coming in.
questions?
No, just
Please,
keep us in the
people,
loop
be
and whatever
safe
we can
on
do to
4th of
help.
July, please be safe with your fires, be safe with your
Tomorrow we have a regular meeting. Do we want to have Valerie maybe come and do a spiel at public comment about fire prevention? Just
Certainly
because
welcome
it'll be
to.
on TV, and I think it's perfect timing.
Certainly
Yeah.
welcome to.
I think that's a great idea,
We're
Patty,
here-
because
here
it'll be
at noon.
rebroadcast
Yeah.
throughout the next 2 weeks.
We're at
Valerie
noon.
loves to be on
Here
TV
at noon.
with us.
Noon tomorrow? Okay.
I'd be happy to do that because I come at it from a different slant.
I think it'd be great if you could, because we have meetings at noon with public comment. That would be great.
Good idea. Great, thank you, guys.
You all.
Guys, appreciate it.
Good day.
Appreciate it.
I was going to take
He's
your.
doc- he's
I was going to take the picture of the three of you sitting there, so I could
He's
say you were
documenting his
presenting.
career on the
Just
board.
for the social media
Makes me crazy.
component.
right,
I
where
don't
are
know
we?
about
The
that.
bucket of
I may have to do
water.
that later. We'll come back later.
See you, Joey.
So we
Thank you.
don't have our applicant, and it's 15 minutes late.
Rick back there.
Yes, wait, who's?
Can go into future.
Future agendas, Rachel, did
Probably
you have
for the
future
fire
agendas in
We
your
did not have
packet?
future agendas in our packet.
Yes.
There was
So,
They
let's,
got left out, I don't know how, but they did.
let's move on to future
Does
agendas.
that mean we're not having?
It means we're done for the rest of the year.
Yeah, not everyone will be here. So I apologize that
It's okay.
you did not have those. I can share. There are just a few changes I wanted to note for the board. We are going to add a facilities update in discussion items on Tuesday, next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, we're off, it's the 4th of July.
I'm sorry,
following
July
Tuesday.
11th. Thank you, Patty. Yes,
I was
I'm
gonna be
still-
here.
Still recovering my
He's in another
my
country.
calendar here. So
On
July
an
11th, we'll
island.
be adding that. On July 18th, we moved the Forest Service update on the decision on the environmental assessment that was canceled today. So we'll be doing that at 1 o'clock on the 18th. And then
You know, John, on the 18th, we have our joint Open Space and Trails Board meeting.
yes,
Sometimes that may go over by a few minutes. I don't know I've talked to Gary briefly about an agenda on that, so
we could
just in
see-
terms of coordinating with the Forest Service, he may
just letting him know.
may want to give a little,
Okay.
look at different timing on that.
Wasn't there something else that was happening that day?
I was
We
thinking
do
about that.
We do have time. What's that?
We have a joint meeting with P&Z in the afternoon scheduled as well.
We had talked about how many people would be there on the 18th, and I will be there. I'm not sure if I misspoke
No, because
before.
originally it was on closer to the end of the month when I have an Akron meeting.
Right, it was the 25th, and neither Patty or
So
I
we
will be
moved it up
there,
a
so
week.
it's been moved back to
No
the 18th.
conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay, because we just didn't have a printout of future agendas in our packets to be able to
So
look
we're
at.
winging
Oh, I see, okay.
That's
Yeah,
why we're
and
struggling
so-
here a little bit.
So the
Hey, you're not there on
advantage
the
of
25th
being
too.
online.
No, I'll be at Akron.
Sometimes.
No, I leave on the 27th for vacation.
Okay. Yeah. So we've got that right on
So
that.
that gets moved
Akron,
to the
so-
18th, and we'll be able to be there. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's all I had on future. agendas.
Anybody else have anything on
No,
future agendas?
I don't have any future agendas because I didn't have any future agendas. You're getting off easy.
Well, just so, since I don't have it here, you're aware, I will not be here for
So I'm trying to do what I
the
can't
meeting on the
figure
25th. Tuesday, the 25th, I will not be here, and Patty will not be here.
I will be here, but I have Akron
Yeah.
in the morning.
So
Okay.
we've got you listed as being out on the 25th, and I think
I
the
leave on the
concern was
27th.
is
We
if
have
we
an
were
exec
doing.
session starting at 11 a.m. on the 25th.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think the concern was if we had the meeting with Open Space and Trails that we.
Not a problem.
Okay. Okay, that takes care of that. Back to open discussion. Anybody else have anything for open discussion?
I'm open discussion. We have already discussed.
So,
I have,
you have one thing? Go ahead.
I have
I
one
just
thing.
wanted to bring something up.
so we have a meeting scheduled with Senator Bennett's staff on Thursday afternoon. And Rachel said you were not going to be here.
I will not be there
Oh, you won't be here either. Okay, that's fine. Because, well,
because there'll be just two of you.
I'm going to go. I'll be there.
Well, we originally had it scheduled for a meeting at the in the courthouse boardroom, and I wasn't sure at that point how many people were actually going to be attending, and I thought maybe we need to move that, so it was moved to the Health and Human Services building. And I didn't also know where Senator Bennett's staff would be coming from or going to, if what was going to be convenient. So it may only be, if it's only 3 commissioners and I don't know how many staff and
I
just
think it's
2.
just Sarah.
Yeah, and I think though that they might be advertising it, so I think it might be more. I think more folks might
They're wise to keep
end
it
up
out
coming.
there.
Okay, so
I think and Georgia, the concern may have come from you originally.
It was, yes.
But I think it's a legitimate concern that even though I don't know if you saw the announcement, the healthcare vote did get delayed, so it won't happen until after 4th of July. But I think there is some concern that if the healthcare vote was potentially happening this week and such, we might have a lot of interested parties that wanted to come and
I bet we'll still
be
will.
part of that. So.
But they're, I'm a little confused then. They're having a request to meet with the commissioners, which is noticed, it's a public meeting. But aren't they having a
Are they having a public meeting
As well, or
as
after?
well?
They usually do, but I don't know. I haven't.
I think it's just, I thought it was just Sarah coming over to discuss issues with us.
I
That's-
thought she
that's
was
usually what it
bringing
is.
the new state director
She is?
for introduction.
Just for introductions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So that'll be
just kind of
coming from-
clarify with them, are they, having kind of two parts, mostly with commissioners, although it's public meeting, public can attend, and the second part with public, semi-town hall with staff, and figure out the room from there.
So, George, are you wanting to move it, or?
Well, two things. One is I don't see this as a town meeting, at least the way it was presented to us. They occasionally come and meet with the commissioners just to have an opportunity to give us an update and provide us an opportunity to give them some feedback. And usually they also have a different meeting for the public at large in terms of more of a town format. And so I just want to clarify that it is or is not a town format. It's just a meeting with the commissioners, which is open to the public. Mm-hmm. And for their convenience, I would, especially since it looks like we're not going to have all the commissioners there, would it be more convenient to have it back here in the courthouse or to leave it at the Health and Human Services building?
They'll be coming over from Eagle.
Yep, I don't know where they're,
They're going to come to
if
pass.
they're here first or, yeah. So those are all my questions and concerns.
Okay.
Just need to give Sarah a call.
Yeah, okay.
That's her name, right?
Are you going to be there, John, on Thursday?
Yeah, I was planning on being
Any
there.
other staff that you know of?
Well, we had invited Karen and Nan to attend, I think, particularly because of the upcoming healthcare vote, and if we had an opportunity to talk about our local concerns there. So HHS made some sense in that regard.
All right, great.
Right.
Greg?
It just looks like just looking at the minute staff, it looks like Kara and Julia and Rich and others will be there as well, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah,
that's what I
Kara
see on
will
the,
be there
who,
for sure.
who said they're going, right? First of all, I just wanted to mention that tomorrow's Bike to Work Day. We're all going to bike to work.
I don't ride a bike, but I'll walk.
All right, there you go. That doesn't count. Sorry. Hey, it's Bike to Work Day. The last thing I was going to say is something came up, and when Nan and Karen were here, I wanted to bring it up, but I put it off. Just that regarding opioid abuse, there's still this gnawing issue that when somebody gets a prescription for an opioid, we probably all have, they give you a bottle of 30, you use 2, and the rest go in your medical cabinet, and that begins the problem of the overabundance of opioids and opioid prescriptions in the country. I'm just wondering if we can address that small part of the substance abuse issue that they're all trying to deal with by approaching the providers, the purveyors of the opioids in our own community, whether it's the hospital,
the doctors to limit
the
their
doctors,
prescriptions?
and just say, come on, in Europe I hear they give you 2 days supply and you've got to go back and ask for more, because often, I don't know, John, how many opioids did you take after you had your mouth surgery? Did you take the whole bottle?
10.
Yeah, I
used them all?
I took one, and I had plenty left over.
Anecdotally, that's what happens with almost
Cut
everyone.
mine in half and took
That's a great thing that you're bringing up, Greg. And I just came back from the Gunnison Water Conference, and I always read all the newspapers I can while I'm there. And Gunnison's hospital district or their area was chosen for a demonstration project in Colorado, and I think a few others. And they were really working with the prescribers and the providers about both alternate pain treatment for things that really don't rise to the level of opioids, and then secondly, what is the appropriate dosage and how to go forward from there. And so maybe we can see what they're doing and try to convene something around the same sort of concept for reduced overprescription. And this is bubbling up everywhere. It's a topic just everywhere I go anymore. I'm sure Steve has heard it. ARP had a cover story, ARP magazine, recently.
How about it?
And it talked about seniors selling their pills on the black market to help augment their income. And then there's a recent article that's just been put forward as well that over 50% of the people prescribed opiates have mental health issues, and that they're using them for all off-label uses to help sedate people. So it really has become just a profit center, regardless of the consequences of addiction within communities. So
I think, Rachel, the idea of tying into what's happening in Gunnison, but we really need to talk with the chief of staff at AVH.
Oh, sure.
I mean, Dave Ressler would be into that, but the chief of staff, because so many of our physicians down the valley are directly associated with AVH. So when AVH has a meeting with their medical professionals, it's a captured audience in a room, and I think that would be a great way to share with them what's happening in Gunnison.
Because nobody wants to interfere with legitimate pain management, and there are folks who suffer long-term debilitating pain. But on the other hand, it's more this short-term use where people don't think they can get addicted for a surgery, and they could be tapering into extra a leave or something else that doesn't happen, and there's problems. But that also I believe is very much issue that could, as Patty's saying, to the AVH, but through our new health department to see what Gunnison's doing and see what we could pick up on and
keep
follow.
an eye on it. It's a good idea.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Just anecdotally, but the last time I was prescribed opioid, and I think it was by the VA, they gave me 2 pills. I took one. A friend asked me for the other one, and at that point I destroyed the other one. Because I was not going to give it to my friend
It's
for
illegal
recreational use.
It's illegal to prescribe medications when you don't have a license to do so.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Nope, tomorrow
So
noon.
with that, we'll adjourn and be back here at noon tomorrow.
Great.
Thanks,
And then we
Grassroots.
have after our regular meeting tomorrow,
We do.
right? For like 4 hours, 5 hours?
Bite close.
Oh, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah, I'm driving to Granby tonight tomorrow night's after the meeting, so hopefully not too long. That's a 5-hour drive.
Well, it's a short meeting tomorrow to begin
Okay,
with.
yeah.
The meeting's going to go.
Yeah,
There isn't much on the agenda. Tomorrow's
yeah,
agenda should be
I'm guessing an hour and a half.
hour and a
or-
half. So
Okay. I just
I
wanted
think
to
John would guess an hour.
put that out there, that I do have a drive.
it's a short meeting.
You gonna ride your bike down to Basalt with John Armstrong and crew?
No.
Retirement thing?
No, if I get out early, I'll go home and ride back up. I'm not bringing my bike up. It's too.
Yeah.
I'll be dressed up.
But your trip was good.